certainly here in the near term. We haven't offered early retirement yet, but I do plan to do that, and we'll be introducing that in June. So all voluntary options for people to exit the airline we'll be exploring, and that I think we'll want to continue that well into next year.
Gary, can I just take you back to what you said a few moments ago about the low-cost carriers likely to see a disproportionate amount of demand coming back? Do you think consumers are going to be price sensitive? Do you think there'll be some elasticity here, i.e. lower fares will drive higher demand? Or do you think that passengers will be looking for other factors such as you say, social distancing, maybe priority boarding, these kinds of factors?
Well, obviously what is so unique is that this is a pandemic. We haven't seen anything like this in our lifetime. And that does demand that until people are comfortable that the virus is under control with therapeutics, with vaccines, that absolutely will need to be, our society will need to continue to have these kinds of precautions with social distancing and with cleaning, with masks, hand sanitizers. All of those things will need to continue. At some point, we'll get past the pandemic. At some point, I believe we'll get back to a more normal condition, but I don't see that happening for quite some time. So more than a low fare will be required, you're right. But in addition to all those other things, low fares are absolutely fundamental in an environment like this, and especially since I would expect business travel to be so weak.
One of the other factors that is so critical to an LCC, a low-cost carrier, is a turnaround time. You want to have your aircraft in the air, you want them to be flying. Obviously, that's not a factor right now, but nevertheless, as you've indicated, there are going to be a whole load of extra precautions that are likely to be in place that are going to slow your whole schedule down. What's the kind of network effect of that likely to be, and how does that change the kind of route economics that you're looking at the moment?
Well, right now we're able to handle all these activities, as you point out, because the passenger load factors are so modest. But we're very efficient. I think that we can do the cleanings in between flights very efficiently, and we already had a number of initiatives underway to improve the efficiency of our turn process. So I think you'll still find that Southwest is superior in all ways when it comes to efficiency, and especially with the turn at the airport.
What can you do, Gary, to inspire confidence in Wall Street and the investor class again, particularly after Warren Buffett said he was pulling out, that being the death knell for a lot of investors, even if you don't necessarily agree with Warren Buffett's thesis?
Well, as usual, you have to have a compelling story, and then you have to deliver. So we'll need to show results. Right now, we're at the bottom of the trough, so I think everybody understands that coming out of March, April was not going to be a good month. May is not much better, although we are seeing some improvements. And we just need to continue to have steady progress. In the meantime, we tell all of our people and all of our investors certainly that we've cut our spending by billions of dollars this year, and that austerity program will need to continue into the future until we get back to prosperity. We'll want to have as an objective to pay down debt and just make sure that we are running a very, very efficient, low-cost operation until the revenue environment is repaired.
So all of your preparations seem predicated on revenue coming back, even if it's 5 years down the road. If it does, Gary, or if it takes longer than that, or if there are just too many airplane seats looking for too few customers, is there a round of consolidation that takes place? What would be the tipping point for you to consider something like that?
Well, I think all that, again, is premature, and right now we're just making sure that we keep Southwest healthy and that we survive this crisis. How long it takes to survive, I think, is the essence of your question, and then what techniques will we need to not just survive but then thrive are all open. We acquired AirTran Airways in 2010, so obviously we've proven that it's something that we're willing to do and able to do. That's not the preferred course at this point, but yeah, I think you make an excellent point that in this kind of an environment, if in fact travel demand is lower, there very well could be some consolidation. If so, we want to be prepared for that. But right now, we're just doing everything we can to minimize our spending, focus on safety, focus on the health, and then make sure we have plenty of cash, and we've done all of those things.
All right, Gary, tough times. Our thanks to you for joining us today. Gary Kelly, Southwest CEO.
That was Gary Kelly, Chief Executive Officer of Southwest, interviewed by Vonnie Quinn and Guy Johnson of Bloomberg. Just as sort of a point of reference, Paul, I was struck by the statistic in a New York Times article over the weekend that the major U.S. airlines are losing $350 to $400 million a day due to expenses like payroll, rent, and aircraft maintenance versus the income that is just non-existent. Passenger traffic down 94%. This according to Airlines for America, a trade group. There's a question of, will people fly even if some of the shutdowns are lifted? Will there be enough confidence? I don't know the answer, Paul.
I don't know either. And it's, the skies are absolutely quiet now. There's just almost nothing in the air, save some occasional flights and some a FedEx or UPS plane, but that's about it.
Yeah, and there's a question of what do these airline companies do in response to this? Do they try to raise money like United Air? Well, that didn't do so hot. George Ferguson joining us now, and he commented on that. He's senior aerospace analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence. George, anything strike you from that interview with the CEO of Southwest?
Well, I mean, I think that Gary Kelly paints a very good picture for Southwest, and I think they are as well positioned as any airline could be, given the problems right now in the world. And I think, Gary spoke to the fact that he can deliver seat miles cheaper, and that in a world where there's less business travel and more leisure travel, that you're going to see, that the ability to provide a low fare as a differentiating factor. I think that's entirely correct. I think his company's it's really built around the U.S. domestic market, so we expect that to come back first. That really works for him well. Even on Friday, as Southwest bond deal was failing, as United's bond deal was failing, Southwest signed a deal with BOC Aviation to lease back some more airplane sale lease back for $800 million, a bunch of MAXs, a bunch of NGs. People still like that collateral. He owns a lot of his fleet, which means that he can do more of these kind of exercises that will get him cash to make it to the new world. So I think Gary Kelly's Southwest is particularly well positioned, again, given where the world looks like it's going right now. And I think he brought out all those points in the discussion. Wow.
Hey, George, just real quickly, 30 seconds. Do the airlines need another round of bailout?
If we're going to keep this number of airlines, they do. If we don't see demand come back really strongly by 4Q, they will. Yep.
George Ferguson, thanks so much for joining us. George is a senior airline and aerospace analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence with decades following these companies. As we heard, Lisa, from Gary Kelly, they are just battening down the hatches here and, really kind of, I think, getting ready for a long haul where travel is going to be at much reduced levels here.
Yeah, indeed. And we'll continue to discuss this going forward. This is Bloomberg.
Coming up, we're going to talk to the business of Wall Street here. We're going to have some gaming and lodging, Lisa. It's going to be really interesting to see that. That's another industry that is going to be very interesting to see how it plays out coming forward. So we'll have more on that. Right now, we're taking a look at the markets here. We still have a little bit of red on the screen. Taking a look at where we have the S&P down 16 points, the Dow down 215 points. Let's get a sense of where things are going in the world of small caps. We welcome Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at right now?
Well, down is the short answer. The Russell 2000 index lower by 1.7%. The S&P 500 is only down 0.6%. So smaller companies mean bigger losses at the moment. Steepest drop in the Russell belongs to Recro Pharma, whose ticker is REPH. The drug developer and producer has fallen 39.5%. First quarter results showed a wider loss than analysts expected in a Bloomberg survey. Scorpio Bulkers, ticker SALT, S-A-L-T, has dropped 17%. The owner of commodity tankers posted a wider first quarter loss and lower revenue than projected and cut its dividend by 75%. And Chatham Lodging Trust, ticker CLDT, has slipped 12.5%. The hotel owner's first quarter funds from operations and revenue were much lower than estimates. Now, the Russell's sharpest advance belongs to Myocardia, ticker MYOK. The drug developer has climbed 63.5%. Myocardia's proposed treatment for a rare heart condition met the goals of a late-stage study. And Amneal Pharmaceuticals, ticker AMRX, has risen about 20%. The generic drug maker posted first quarter earnings and sales that were well above estimates.
Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, thank you so much for being with us. We were just talking about the airline industry. Let's shift to another one that's suffering dramatically, and that is the hospitality and lodging sector. We're looking at Marriott International, which saw its revenue per available room plunge 90% in April. The question is, how do you batten down the hatches and gird for the future there? Brian Eckert joining us now, senior gaming and lodging analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Can you give us a sense, Brian, of just how bad the carnage is and has been this earnings season versus expectations in this sector, the lodging sector?
Sure. So we entered a situation where most of the major lodging companies have already effectively pre-announced results. And, declines are certainly severe. If you look at revenue per available room, the key metric, that was down about 23% in the first quarter for both Marriott and Hilton. But more notably, in April, that metric was down 90%. So you still have a lot of hotels that are currently closed. There is some pace of reopening, but it's going to be gradual and mixed and phased across the world depending upon the type of hotel.
So, Brian, I guess the question for a lot of industries, a lot of companies is kind of consumer behavior. How is it going to be affected as we come out on the other side of this? Will we see material and maybe even permanent changes in consumer behavior? I know you do a lot of work following the casinos in Macau, and as Asia starts to open up, what are some of the early feedback from the hotels and the casino and the other consumer-facing businesses there in Asia?
So it's coming back slowly. I mean, the early indications are, as of the most recent months, certainly we've had 80-90% declines in at least gaming revenue. In Asia, the hotels also coming back slowly, but because they entered this pandemic earlier, arguably they have the potential to start to recover somewhat sooner. I think what you're seeing within the U.S. is, again, it's going to be mixed by region where drive-to limited service hotels in local locations probably can come back a little bit quicker. But group hotels that depend on conventions, large resorts, major gateway cities are likely to come back somewhat slower. And likewise, it'll be varied, across the world in terms of U.S. versus Europe, et cetera.
So we were just talking, Brian, to George about the airline companies and he was saying that without another government bailout, it's unlikely that all of the companies will survive in the way that they are currently. What's the consolidation wave going to look like in the lodging space if things continue the way that they're expected to?
Sure. So we've already had a tremendous amount of consolidation in the lodging sector. Just to point that out, there are many small independent hotels, but certainly the large chains like Marriott and Hilton have benefited from ample consolidation. And then you look at companies like Marriott that just reported today, they do have $4.3 billion in liquidity. So given the amount of the cash burn rate, if you will, that they face during this period of downturn, that provides them with quite a long runway for them to be able to sustain even very draconian RevPAR declines as large as 90%. Doesn't mean there couldn't be some combination, consolidation, or even independent hotels that might try to convert their brand flag and convert to, let's say, a Marriott brand or something else. But, certainly in terms of consolidation, because we've seen so much of it already, I think in terms of major chains, they are, at least for their part, fairly well positioned to kind of weather this downturn and come back slowly.
Brian, where are we in terms of supply of rooms in the marketplace? It just feels like there's been a lot of hotels, a lot of new construction, a lot of supply added to the market. Are we oversupplied here, or do you think, given the pullbacks in demand, that the supply and demand are in decent shape?
So we had seen kind of a low single-digit pace of new supply, and there were some concerns that maybe supply was growing more quickly in, let's say, the limited or select service segments. The reality is that because of the pandemic, you may see some openings delayed. What Marriott had said in their call is in terms of scheduled or planned hotel openings in 2020, they don't know if that'll be down by 25% or 50%, but it certainly will be affected. But again, I think in terms of supply, it really, at least some of the slower level of construction, they actually work to the benefit of the hotels. And you've got a decent number of hotels in construction. Those that were fairly well along and being built continue to work through that construction process. But I think the bigger issue is how long does it take for demand itself to recover?
And then there's a question, Brian, of additional spending to try to ensure that people feel confident that they aren't going to get sick or that these hotel rooms are clean. I mean, we've heard about some types of ventilation that are changing and different cleaning standards that can be maintained to sort of show potential clients that they are safe. What are you hearing in terms of spending on that side?
So I don't know if it's a question of spending as much as protocols and practices. The way that companies have approached this as they think about the process of reopening is the likelihood of having some food and beverage outlets closed or operating at limited service with a lot of pickup and takeout, of having, in some cases, if hotels are running at very low occupancy, a limited utilization of certain floors, having a lot of safety and cleaning protocols in place for housekeeping. But the reality is because some hotels might find it practical or lose less money by opening at 10% occupancy rather than staying closed, because they're opening with such limited occupancy in some cases in order to mitigate losses, the reality is that accommodating social distancing might be somewhat easier to execute given the fact that the level of occupancy is so slow to begin with, at least during the initial stages of recovery.
Brian Egger, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate that. Brian Egger covers all things hospitality and gaming for Bloomberg Intelligence. Marriott reporting some numbers today in the RevPAR and the occupancy levels, obviously down significantly, Lisa. And, it just kind of comes back to the question. We're talking with Brian Egger on the hospitality and George Ferguson on the airlines. It's kind of about consumer behavior. How will consumers come out of this on the back half of this pandemic in terms of behavior, in terms of going on planes, going to hotels, going to conferences and casinos and things like that?
Yeah, at the same time, we're getting to summer, and I will say a lot of my friends and I have been talking about the fact that our kids are not going to be going to camp, and there is no sign of vacation on the forefront. What do? Do you just stay in your home indefinitely? Do you try to get out? How do you get out? Do you stay at hotels? I mean, these are all the considerations as people start to face a very bleak number of indefinite months ahead, and it just raises a question: how can hotels entice people back, and what sort of the confidence level they have to get? Yeah,
I think, and there's a sizable part of the population, and I think it's a growing percentage that says we need to get back out there. We need to get this economy going. We need to get out of the house and start moving again. We've bent the curve, and maybe we're at the point where we're able to get out there. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Indeed. Coming up, we'll have more on this, as well as, of course, hearing from Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, on the latest in that region. Right now, though, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager with World and National Headlines. Nathan.
Lisa, the lockdown in New York City is likely to continue into next month. We got that word just moments ago from Mayor Bill de Blasio as he announced a new initiative to help community health centers battle the coronavirus.
Get them right now more deeply into things like telemedicine and the test and trace initiative, and leave them in stronger shape for the future as well, serving the communities that have been hardest hit during this crisis.
De Blasio says hospital and emergency care admissions in New York City are falling, but he says the numbers need to stay down consistently before he can think about relaxing restrictions. A new survey from the Associated Press and the University of Chicago Divinity School finds 71% of Americans think people should continue to stay at home. That's down from 80% in an earlier poll. 55% say they oppose public protests against restrictions. President Trump continues to push the country to reopen as the outbreak inches closer to his office. Vice President Pence's press secretary tested positive for COVID-19 last week. 2 members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff missed a White House meeting over the weekend after their own brushes with the illness. The administration's top health experts are self-quarantining as well. They're set to appear at a Senate hearing on the government's response to the pandemic through video conference tomorrow. The Trump administration is sounding more resistant to another round of stimulus even after the latest dire jobs numbers. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin talked about it on CNBC.
Now, what the president has said is, let's step back for a few weeks. Let's be very considerate in what we do in the next round before we go consider spending another $1 trillion or more of taxpayer money. But the president is determined we'll do whatever we need to do.
Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
What began in China has expanded worldwide.
Is it China that's going to lead that consumer recovery?
What have we learned?
I'm curious as to what you're monitoring most closely in the news flow.
What can we predict?
Are you seeing a time when you can expect recovery in global travel?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Do people realize that those numbers are going to get a lot worse?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
The world's financial...
Did somebody say just me? Get delivery like a G. See? Hungry dogs gotta eat. I get mines every day, every week. Chicken wings to the crib, I'm sitting in. Burger in the low. Hope they put the pickle in. Wonton on a catamaran. Oodles and noodles. Thank you, my man. J-U-S-T-E-A-T. Somebody say just eat.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Butcher Selection quarter-pounder beef burgers, get a 4-pack for just £2.28. And salmon fillets, get a 2-pack for only £2.97. So dinner's always a winner. At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Imagine winning 10 grand.
Yes!
With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! I'm
Unbelievable.
Set for life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Hey, y'all, we're taking the Marty Party to a whole new level with the Marty Smith's America podcast with Gerald McCoy.
I truly believe that Carolina made a mistake letting Cam go. This is not a personal shot at Teddy Bridgewater. This could have been Andy Dalton. This could have been whoever they brought in. Cam has so much left. Somebody's really getting a great one, man. And I don't think people really understand what they're getting.
Search Marty Smith America to listen.
At Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are down as the latest moves to relax restrictions amid the pandemic have raised concern over future lockdowns, second, third, fourth waves that could further hamper the global economy. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is down 0.4%, down 13. The Dow's down 0.8%, down 200. And the NASDAQ is up 0.2%, up 16. The 10-year is down 2/32 with a yield of 0.69%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down now 0.6% at $24.60 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 1% at $16.96.90 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.62. The euro $1.811, and the British pound $1.23.33. GNC Holdings has hundreds of millions of dollars of debt payments due this coming Saturday that it can't pay, and unless lenders give it more time, the Vitamin Company says it'll be forced to file for bankruptcy protection. GNC's down 9.5%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Lisa, I grew up in a household where my parents were children of the Depression, and it really impacted even, all through my childhood, kind of how they viewed life in terms of, money and, food security and all these things. And I think, it was such a significant impact on their lives that really, I think, impacted them their entire lives. And some folks are questioning whether this pandemic will have a similar effect on some of the young folks today and what it means for consumer behavior, and will the consumer actually come back and spend and act coming out of the pandemic as they did going into the pandemic. Christopher Condon, he's a Federal Reserve reporter for Bloomberg News, joining us from Washington, D.C. Christopher, thanks so much. I know you kind of had a really interesting story, Scarred and Scared, the reshaping of American consumer begins. This is really, I think, fascinating story. What did you find out?
Thank you, Paul. I think we're, compared to any expectations for a quick return of the American consumer, there's not a lot of evidence to support that would be the case, simply because the consumer is getting hit on really multiple levels. The story that I wrote about addresses 3 levels, where first of all, the most obvious is that a lot of people are losing their income. So it's not about their willingness to spend, but their ability to spend, and that's going to be severely damaged, and probably in many cases for quite a while. But then moving even beyond that, we know from past experience, and you brought up the Great Depression, which I also talked about in that story. There is a knock-on effect. It's not just for those people that lose their job and lose income, but when you see neighbors and friends and family members affected, it also, we know from a past experience, can affect people's spending habits. They get a little bit more cautious. And you know, what I thought was really interesting, the economists that I spoke to brought up again and again that this is the second time in the space of about 12 years where we're hearing this is the worst recession since the Great Depression. And that really can begin. We don't know. This is a bit speculative, but that can really affect the psyche of people as workers, as consumers for a very long time, just as you talked about your parents. And then finally, just the other obvious thing about this, it's not just about economics for the consumer, it's about their own health. This contagion can affect you. Obviously, it can kill people. So that adds another element of fear. Again, we're being speculative here. We don't know how long it's going to last. But when you talk about risks like this, it brings in the emotional side of decision-making for consumers. And economists that have studied that say it's very difficult to overcome. It doesn't mean everybody's going to stop shopping. But even at the margin, if many millions of people are affected by this for a long period of time, that will have a great drag on our economy.
Chris, some people say that the consumer is in a much better situation now than it was heading into the 2008 crisis, and that the U.S. government has supplied a big enough stimulus to offset a good deal of the missed pay for a large proportion of the U.S. population. They point to that as one of the reasons why consumer spending may be more resilient on the other side of this. Did any of the economists you spoke with address that?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things to say there, I think, Lisa. It's true that on aggregate, if you look at household debt to income, it's in a much better place. But those numbers are really skewed by the upper end, the top 10%, the top 1%. If you look at the middle deciles across the distribution of this data, people in the middle and even the upper to middle range were not in a very good position in terms of debt to income before this. So those numbers are slightly misleading, I think. Second is that it's true there has been a huge amount of support being brought out by the federal government. Now the question is, how long is that a sufficient enough bridge? It may help for a while, but unemployment benefits, now, even with the extension in the CARES Act going out to, say, 39 weeks for a lot of states, that's going to help a lot of people, but it won't bridge the full gap for many people who will lose their jobs for longer than that. And the $600 supplemental amount per week that the federal government kicked in as well, that's super, but it only lasts until July 31. So it, again, how will it really bridge the gap? And even then, we talk about already the psychological scarring effect. If you are able to bridge the gap in your income and then you have work again, we can still ask, are you going to be as aggressive in your spending as you were before? So we don't really know the answers to all these questions, but it is quite worrying.
Chris Condon, thank you so much for being with us. Chris Condon, U.S. economy reporter for Bloomberg News, joining us on the consumer confidence hit from the coronavirus. And I will just say, Paul, it's really interesting to see the response to articles about the spread of the virus, with some people saying it's fear-mongering and that the virus has a pretty low fatality rate and that the shutdowns also have a high fatality rate. And other people saying, well, the reason why it's not a lot higher and why we're not seeing many more deaths is because of the shutdowns and this sort of push-pull in public sentiment ongoing as the U.S. and the rest of the world considers how to reopen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it has a little bit to do with kind of where in the country you reside. If you're kind of in that New York metro area, you probably have a different view than if you're in Middle America, where you really haven't been that impacted by it.
Yeah, coming up, we're going to speak with Max Neeson, and we're going to hear from Governor Cuomo. From New York, this is Bloomberg Markets.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. An attempt to carry over last week's optimism quickly fading this session. Stocks in the red as investors digest earnings data. Marriott saw its business crater in April with travel shut down around the world. About the only consolation in the disastrous April jobs report on Friday was that 2 million of the more than 20 million to lose their job indicated their dismissals were permanent. That's according to the Labor Department. That means that about 18 million Americans on temporary layoff have the potential of returning to work more quickly. AMC Entertainment soaring on a report from a UK newspaper that Amazon has discussed a potential takeover of the largest movie theater owner. And Elon Musk has emerged as perhaps the loudest voice in corporate America advocating for the economy to reopen. He's now threatening to move his Tesla assembly plant out of California. Local officials have blocked the factory from reopening. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba, please be done. Over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at NHTSA.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Economics.
Are we still ultra-accommodative?
Finance.
Do you see this as a technical correction?
Investment.
The markets move seismically.
The Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Mistakes are made when you sell something because you need to sell it.
Tom Keene, Jonathan Ferro, and the names that shape the world's markets.
We speak with Professor Schiller of Yale University.
David Solomon, the Goldman Sachs CEO, joins me.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Listen today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. In-depth analysis.
The garden tools that mean you can grow your own. The fire pit that turns tea time into an alfresco dining experience. The paddling pool that turns your back garden into a water park. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Butcher Selection quarter-pounder beef burgers, get a 4-pack for just £2.28. And salmon fillets, get a 2-pack for only £2.97. So dinner's always a winner. At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores online, subject to availability.
Imagine winning 10 grand.
Yes!
With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Helen is dreaming of fighting a flock of 40-foot flamingos. But in reality, she's helping fight COVID-19 in her sleep. Like thousands of others, she's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments.
Thank you.
Keep fighting, Helen. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the Dream Team tonight.
Dream Lab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
Right now at the Halifax, wherever we're working from, we're all working together to be there for you.
So our customers can apply for a payment holiday on mortgages, loans or credit cards.
And because we want you to stay home and stay safe,
we've created step-by-step guides to help you set up online and mobile banking.
Which is safer and easier than you may think.
But for those that really need to see us in person, we're keeping as many branches open as possible.
So however you need us at the Halifax,
we're here to help. Terms and conditions apply. For more information, go to halifax.co.uk.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, plays to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we will bring you the daily press briefing from New York Governor Andrew Cuomo coming up in just moments. Plus, we'll also speak with Max Neeson, Bloomberg Opinion columns, talking about the pharmaceutical, big tech, pharma angle to the coronavirus, what's going on in the world of healthcare. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Paul, the S&P did drop from a 2-week high, but it's off its earlier lows. United Airlines Holdings slumped after scrapping a $2.25 billion sale of junk bonds. Marriott tumbled as its earnings collapsed. Dean Cornett at Macro Risk Advisors tells Bloomberg, with things moving so fast, he thinks investors should consider the classic hedge.
We're kind of in no man's land, and so I'm just continuing to recommend to folks to really take a hard look at gold.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 0.2%, down 6. The Dow is down 0.6%, down 146, and the Nasdaq is up 0.4%, up 35. The 10-year is down 4/30 seconds. The yield is 0.69%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 1.2% at $24.45 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 0.9% at $16.9920 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.63. The euro is $1.812, and the British pound is currently $1.2344. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We are awaiting the daily press conference from Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York. Right now, I want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of the spread of the coronavirus. Max Neeson, Bloomberg healthcare columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, joining us now. Max, always wonderful to get your perspective. I want to start with a cluster of cases in Wuhan. It's just 5 cases, but a cluster nonetheless that were diagnosed for the first time since that city emerged from its strict lockdown. We're also seeing a surge in cases in pockets in South Korea. What does this tell you about the nature of the spread of the virus and the path of the pandemic going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what it tells you is something that should be quite apparent already, that this is going to be a complicated, long-term job, a marathon, not a sprint in terms of controlling the virus. You point to that South Korea cluster. There was a guy who went clubbing, more or less, and infected, a bunch of different people that went on to infect some other people. They managed to catch and isolate, hopefully, most of those cases. But, that's in the country that's arguably done the best job in the world at sort of containing, contact tracing, hefty testing. And we're way behind on those capabilities as many states open up. So it just highlights that we're going to see more of these stories to come. And the challenge is whether those little outbreaks are caught when they're little, or they transition into significant second waves, or as might be the case in the United States, ongoing continuation of a first wave that was never brought under control.
So, Max, we've become accustomed as we listen to the daily press briefing from New York Governor Cuomo about the whole testing and tracing program that's going to be put in place. And again, Governor Cuomo saying how critical that is to opening up the economy. Are other states doing that to the degree that New York is?
They are beginning to, and there are some states that are taking significant efforts I know California is investing heavily, but New York does seem to be making a particularly large effort. I'm hoping that
Max, I'm so sorry to do this. Max Neeson, I feel like I'm always cutting you off, but we always love having you. Thank you for being with us. Max Neeson, Bloomberg opinion columnist covering healthcare. Andrew Cuomo beginning his press briefing that we take on a daily basis here. Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York State.
With her. It's a pleasure to be in Rochester today. Really around the Coit, but for most people, they'll relate to Rochester. It's a pleasure to be in the Rochester Regional Health facility, and I want to thank the President and CEO, Eric Bieber, very much for having us here today. We're joined by a number of elected officials. I want to thank them for being here. We have County Executive Adam Bello. Pleasure to be with you. We have that great congressman who had a really challenging position before he went to Congress because he was working in New York State government. But he's now in Washington, and we need his voice there more than ever. This is going to be a big week in Washington. We need to get the federal government to recognize the situation that state governments face and fund not just corporate America, but fund working Americans, police, firefighters, school teachers. They have yet to do that to the extent necessary, and hopefully with the leadership of the House, we'll get that done this week. We have Robert Duffy, who is former mayor of Rochester, my great lieutenant governor in the first term. Pleasure to be with him as we go forward. We have elected officials here with us today. I also asked the elected officials all across the state to join us to understand today's presentation. So we invited all the county executives, we invited all the mayors to listen to this presentation, because we start a new chapter today in many ways. It's a new phase, if you will. May 15th is the end of the statewide closure. May 15th is the end of this week. And the question is now going to shift more towards localities and regions across the state to make sure they're in a position to open, and the state will be working in coordination with them. But it's an exciting new phase. We're all anxious to get back to work. We want to do it smartly. We want to do it intelligently, but we want to do it. And that's what this week is going to be all about. In terms of where we are, total hospitalizations are down again. That net change is down again. The net change in intubations is down again. The number of lives lost, still too high, obviously at 161, but better than it has been. So we see all the arrows are pointed in the right direction. If you look at the number of new COVID cases per day, about 488, that is just about where we started this horrific situation, right? So May 10th, we're right about where we were on March 19th, before we went into the abyss of the COVID virus. And when you see the number of lives lost, again, we're right about where we started before we really went into the heart of this crisis. And that's what it's been. It's been a crisis, and a painful one. But we're coming out of the other side. So in many ways, from my point of view, we're on the other side of the mountain, right? We got hit with the virus. We saw that incline. We saw the number of cases growing. We saw the number of deaths growing. We finally hit a plateau because we did what we needed to do, and we changed our behavior, and we closed down, and we turned the corner, and then we started to come down the other side, and that was the decline. And now the decline has gotten to a point where we are just about where we started the journey. So to turn to reopening, because we have abated the worst by what we've done, and now we can intelligently turn towards reopening. And that's May 15th, that's this Friday. And local regions all across the state should start to prepare for it, and people as well. And that's what we want to start to talk about today. We're going to open when we're ready to open. What does ready to open mean? Well, first, the number of hospitalizations, the infection rates show decline. The federal government, with CDC guidelines, have laid that out, and we think it's intelligent. We accepted the federal guidance. And we have testing, tracing in place in every local region. Testing and tracing, words we never really heard before this situation, but now people hear them every day. Testing, have the capacity to do enough tests, diagnostic tests, are you positive or you're negative, antibody tests, did you have the virus, and have you resolved the virus? Have that testing capacity in place, tracing, when you find a positive case, trace it back, and then isolate the positive so you reduce the spread. Sounds simple, logistical nightmare, never been done before, but that's what testing, tracing is all about, and that has to be done region by region. That capacity has to fit every locality. We talk about being New York tough and what tough really means, and the second word in New York tough is always smart, and we have been smart through this, and we have to continue to be smart. There are 7 metrics, if you will, to get it down to a quantifiable situation that each region has to look at. First are the infection rate, the number of hospitalizations, the 14-day decline in hospitalizations, or under 15 new hospitalizations. That means you're controlling the hospitalizations. New hospitalizations under 2 per 100,000, so you know that the virus again is under control. Then number 4, let's learn from the past. We had a true public health emergency that we were in danger of overwhelming our hospital capacity. Let's make sure we have 30% buffer in a number of available hospital beds in case that virus takes off again on you. You want to make sure we have hospital beds, so hospitals up to 70%, but 30% available hospital beds, 30% available ICU beds. Many of the people who come in with this virus need an ICU bed. We want to make sure we have the ICU beds if we need them, God forbid. And then testing capacity, so we know what the virus spread is doing. You don't know what the virus is doing unless you are testing. And then the tracing that fits with the testing program. We've been doing more tests than any state in the United States of America. So New York is way ahead in what we're doing on testing. We've come up to speed faster. We're doing more tests per capita than any country on the globe. So we're doing very well in that regard, but you need it in every region. It doesn't help the Finger Lakes if the Capital District has enough testing. You have to have enough testing and enough tracing in the Finger Lakes. So each region has to have that in place, and we understand that. We can measure this. This has always been about data and science for us. And you can look at it, each individual region, and you will know where each region is in the state by those criteria. So you know what your infection rate is, you know what your hospitalization rate is, you know how many tests you need in place, you know how many tracers you need in place. This can be a science. It can be measured, right? And that's what we want to do. We want to demystify this entire issue. It sounds like a science fiction movie. I know. Feel like we've been living a science fiction movie. But you can also study it and analyze it because we have a lot of experience now, right? We've been living with this for months. Other countries have lived with this for months. So let's learn. Let's be smart. That's who we are. And we can do that by each region in the state. And you see, depending on the region in the state, some regions are ready to go today. They just need to get some logistical pieces in order by the end of the week. Some places are very close. Central New York, just 1 or 2 criteria that haven't been met yet. And you can do that with Long Island, New York City, all across the state. When we reopen, we're talking about a phased reopening. That's what everyone basically is doing. The question is moderating that phasing and doing it intelligently. But starting with construction and manufacturing, retail, curbside pickup, agriculture, forestry, and fishing, then to phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, monitoring all along. We start with businesses that are more essential and pose a lower risk, right? Because once you say we're going to reopen, they say, well, what first? Well, really, everybody says me first. After me first, what businesses first? Those that are most essential, and those that pose a lower risk because you can socially distance, etc. That's the matrix to make the decision. And then businesses have to do their part also. This is not a one-sided affair. Businesses have to put safety precautions in place. We understand what has to be done, how the workforce has to have personal protection. They have to be socially distanced. The workspace itself, in some cases, has to be adjusted, reconfigured. How do you have people work, but they're 6 feet apart? They don't come to a cafeteria. There's no gathering, right? That's what we're trying to avoid. And then what processes do we have in place to test those employees? Or if an employee is symptomatic, you can get them testing right away. You can then do tracing within the workforce. You look at what's going on around the country, just listen to the news. Those meat processing plants where you have hundreds and hundreds of workers getting sick. We have an agriculture plant in Madison County that dozens of people got sick. It's not about the meat or the agriculture. It's the gathering. It's the density. That's what creates the problem. So learning those lessons and making sure we don't make those mistakes here. On retail, all retail will be authorized to do curbside pickup or drop off or in-store pickup. The essential retail, which has been open all along, will continue operating under the current protocols. We'll also open certain businesses statewide, which are low risk, landscaping, gardening, low risk recreational activities like tennis, drive-in movie theaters. Talk about going back to the future. Back to drive-in movie theaters. I'm okay with that, by the way. Local officials, they have to do their work and their responsibility. Testing and tracing, they have to have those systems in place. We have to have a system in place regionally to monitor the infection rate with the hospitals. That connection has to be very close. They have to know on a day-to-day basis, if not an hour-to-hour basis, how many people are walking into the hospitals. I often do conference calls with all the hospitals in the state to find out exactly what is going on, because they can tell you how many people walk through the door that morning or that afternoon. And you want to be able to watch that, and that has to be done on a regional basis. Businesses have to follow these new rules, but we have to make sure they're following those rules also. And you will get calls from employees who say, I went back to work, but by the way, I'm not comfortable. I don't think this is appropriate social distancing. I don't think I'm been given the appropriate equipment. Regional governments have to be in a position to respond to those. The local governments have to be in communication with each other. We do this on a regional basis. So there are a number of counties in that region, but it's one region. And, you know, this virus doesn't respect county borders or state borders. Those governments have to be in contact with each other. If you know what's happening with your neighbor, you know what's happening in your district. So that has to be in place, and that has to work. And there's also something we call a regional control room, which is made up of the top officials, government officials, academic officials, healthcare professionals that are watching the situation in that region develop. You are going to increase activity. Depending on how intelligently you increase activity will be the possible effect on the spread of the virus. You need to know what the impact is. You need to know it in real time, and you need to be in a position to respond. If it does not go well, and you see that infection rate moving because the hospitals tell you they see an increase or because your testing data shows an increase, you have to be able to pull the plug or slow down the increase in activity, and that's what we call the circuit breaker, right? So you're increasing the activity, you're watching the infection rate, you're watching the hospitalization rate, you see that start to tick up, you have to have a circuit breaker. Slow down the activity level because you're increasing the infection rate, and nobody wants to be there. That means you're going back to the other side of the mountain. And we just made it over the mountain. Nobody wants to go back to the other side of the mountain. So those regional control groups are very important. They have to be in place. They have to communicate. Everyone has to know what each other's responsibilities are going forward. And we have been working with the regions all across the state over the past few weeks. We have those groups assembled, but this week, it's Monday, before Friday, start talking, start communicating, understand who does what, where, and that's true in regions all across the state. But I would urge them now to get on the telephone or Zoom or whatever your preferred technology, start talking, start understanding what happens on Friday, what do our numbers look like, and let's get that all set sooner rather than later. This is the next big step in this historic journey. First phase was figure out what we were dealing with because we had no idea. Scramble, frankly, to deal with a situation that dropped from another planet. Stabilize, ramp up the healthcare system, inform people, get people to understand what we were dealing with, and control the damage. That's the mountain to me. We're now on the other side of the mountain. Next step, how do we reopen? How do we reopen intelligently? And how do we reopen without taking a step back? What we have done thus far is really amazing. And it was because we were smart and because we were unified. And because we did that, we averted tragedy. Let's just remember where we were, right? Remember where you were before you take a step forward. We had the virus that attacked us from Europe. The virus was coming. They now say, the experts now say, the geniuses now say, the virus came from Europe in January and February. And you know what? No one knew. No one knew. With all the sophistication, with all the public health organizations, with that whole alphabet soup of agencies, nobody knew the virus was coming from Europe. Everybody's looking at China, and the virus is coming from Europe. Why? Because by the time we moved, the virus had traveled from China to Europe. And then people are getting on flights from Europe coming to New York. 2 million travelers. 2 million travelers came from Europe. We had no idea. So New York, the East Coast, people were landing at JFK. They were landing at Newark Airport. And that's where the virus came from. January, February, March. Nobody knew. European travel ban goes into effect mid-March. It's too late. It was already here. Okay. Let's learn the lesson going forward. But that was the situation. Those were the cards we were dealt. That's why New York had such high numbers. Not because there's anything special or different about New York, but because New York is where the European flights were coming in, and we didn't know. That was the situation that we were handed. They then say, well, we project hospitalizations to be 120,000. I said, 120,000? You know how many hospital beds we have in this state? 50,000. How can we have hospitalizations of 120,000 if we only have 50,000 beds, counting every bed in the entire state of New York? If you could coordinate every bed, you have 53,000 beds. And they projected 120,000. So, scrambled to try to get more hospital beds. But the only real course was you have to reduce the infection rate. How do you reduce the infection rate? You have to close down, stop people from spreading, stop gathering, stop density. We did that. Otherwise, thousands more people would have died. Thousands more would have died. That is not rhetorical. That is not dramatic. That is a factual statement. Thousands more people would have died. We made that happen. We changed that trajectory. I didn't even know it was possible at one time. When this started, we were at a truly bad and frightening place. If we didn't change the trajectory of this virus, and we had 120,000 people show up at our hospitals, we would have made the situation in Italy look like a walk in the park. We were really at a very, very bad place. Again, through no fault of our own. Virus came from Europe. Whoever would have figured that? Somebody should have, but above my pay grade. We changed the trajectory dramatically by what we did. And that was smart. But we have to stay smart. And we have to stay united. You look at what we've done. New York, the cases are now on the decline. You look at the rest of the nation outside of New York, the cases are still on the incline. We took the worst situation in the nation and changed the trajectory, so now we're on the decline. The rest of the nation, the cases are still on the incline. That is because of what the people in this state did. If you had said when we started this, yes, we have more cases than anyone else. Yes, we had this European virus attack us and nobody expected it. But we're not only going to change our trajectory, we're going to change the trajectory more dramatically than any place else in the nation. And when you look at the nation compared to New York, you're going to see us on the decline, the rest of the nation on the incline. People would have said it was impossible, but we did it. But we have to stay smart. On this next phase, we have to learn from the mistakes that others have made. And we're not the first to reopen. And that's a good thing, because you can look around and learn. Other countries reopened too fast. They didn't have controls in place. And they reopened, and then they had to slow down or they had to stop. We don't want to do that. We want to monitor our reopening, so if there's any change, we can immediately calibrate it. Some states have not coordinated their actions. So you have one county doing this, another county doing this. You've confused the general public. And by the way, Monroe County cannot open in and of itself. Onondaga County cannot open in and of itself. Albany County cannot open in and of itself. There is no county by county plan here. It has to be coordinated, and it has to be at least in a region. And we did that. Other states didn't. It was smart. And there's one set of rules, and the public has to understand the set of rules. Some states are opening even though they haven't met the CDC guidelines, which I don't even know how that happens. The federal government says, here are the CDC guidelines, which are basic health guidelines. Some states don't meet those guidelines, and they're opening anyway. Well, there's a lot of pressure to open. I know, but pressure doesn't mean you act unintelligently, right? Some states opened and then saw a rush of people from surrounding states. We've talked about that here, the concept of an attractive nuisance. Finger Lakes opens. You can't open up an attraction or a site that will be attracting people from outside the region, and then you have a problem you never encountered, right? So that's something to watch. And some places never really made the people part of the plan. And that is a fundamental mistake. Because we are not at a point where government is going to solve anything, frankly. This is people who are solving the problem. Personal opinion as opposed to facts. I did one thing right as governor that I'm proud of. I got the people involved in this situation to a greater degree than they have been involved probably in modern history. Probably in modern history. From day one, this was of such a magnitude that unless people engaged and understood and bought into this, government was impotent. State government can't enforce any of these things that we did. Stay in the house, close every school, close every business. State government can't enforce that. People had to understand the facts, and people had to engage in governing themselves in a way they hadn't in decades. I don't know what happened. I'm still trying to figure out when government got to a place, or when society got to a place where people would accept the lack of professionalism from government, the lack of competence from elected officials. I don't know when government became so political and it all became about rhetoric rather than actual competence. But it happened somewhere along the way. That government could not handle this situation. People had to get engaged. People had to be informed. And that's the one thing I did right. Now, they got engaged because it mattered. This is not an abstract issue. You're talking about people's lives and people's health and the health of their children. So they were interested. They were engaged. But they were also informed. And I worked very hard every day to make sure they knew the facts. Trust the people. Lincoln, right? An informed public will keep this country safe. True. And that's exactly what happened here. And that's what we're going to continue to do. People need to be part of this. The whole plan that we're outlining today is all down. It's online. It's in a book. People need to understand exactly how we do this second phase. Just the way they understood how we were going to get over that mountain and how we were going to flatten the mountain, they have to understand now how we reopen. And they have to be part of it. Understand the plan. Hold me accountable. Hold me accountable. Hold your local officials accountable. But people have to be part of it. And they have to know the facts and know what we're doing. Because it's going to come down to how people react and how people behave. And if they understand what we're doing, they will do it. Just as I couldn't enforce any of this on day one, the local officials are not going to be able to enforce it either. Nobody's going to mandate personal behavior. People have to wear a mask. People have to be smart when they show up at work. People have to be smart when they shop. They have to understand this is not the floodgates are open. Go back, do everything you were doing. Be smart. Nobody's going to protect your health but you. No one's going to protect your children's health but you. Well, children aren't affected. Oh, really? That's another fact that they're going to change on us. Now we're worrying about, we have 93 cases that we're investigating of young children who have COVID-related diseases. So this is about keeping yourself smart and keeping yourself healthy and keeping your family healthy. We'll do everything we can. But you have to be New York tough. Smart is the first word after tough. United, disciplined, loving. Thank you for being here. Any questions?
Governor Cuomo, what will Friday look like, May 15th? Can people just report for work at a construction or manufacturing company that's qualified to open at 9 a.m., start a business? And can a whole staff return, or who will give those answers?
That is going to be, as I said, this is now a shift, right? We're sort of going from phase one, which was basically a state-controlled, one set of rules all across the state. That was phase one. This reopening phase is locally driven, regionally driven, and regionally designed. So the businesses that can open are the businesses that are approved by that region and approved with these conditions, right? Every business that reopens is going to have to meet certain conditions. The state set a certain number of conditions. Local governments may add additional conditions to those businesses and how they open. And that has to be done on a region-by-region basis.
They'll get that information sometime prior to Friday.
Yes.
Governor,
yes.
How long do you anticipate being at each phase? You know, obviously a lot of the big businesses in our area, in any area, is phase two. So how long do you anticipate it taking to get to that point?
It will be determined by the facts and the numbers as you go along, right? You are more of a visual person. You're turning a valve, increasing the economic activity. Your question is, how fast can we open the valve? You have a dial right next to the valve that says infection rate. You have another dial that says hospitalization rate. You can open that valve as fast or as slow to keep that infection rate below 1.1, which is what they call outbreak. If it hits 1.1, it means the virus is increasing exponentially. So watch that dial, watch the hospitalization rate, and the timing of phase one, phase two, phase three, it's determined by those two dials. It's determined by those facts. You watch the infection rate, you watch the hospitalization rate as fast as you can come online without increasing the virus spread to outbreak or increasing the number of deaths, then that's how fast you reopen the economy.
Shut it if it's too fast?
The local region has a control room and a circuit breaker, we call it, to stay with the graphic physical metaphor. A circuit breaker, if you see those dials going into the red zone, if you're really closely watching the dials, you wouldn't have to turn the valve off. You would just slow the valve a little bit, depending on how well your dials are calibrated and whether you're watching or not. So the best would be just slow instead of off. But if the dials go into the red zone, circuit breaker, turn the valve off until you get the dials back under control. The whole ride across the mountain has been getting the spread of the infection under control, what they call the infection rate, how fast it's spreading. It has to be under one, which is one person who is infected infects less than one other person, right? You have to keep the infection rate below that, and you have to keep the hospitalization rate at a manageable level. You can't overwhelm your hospitals, period, because then people die, and that is a universal bad thing. You watch those two dials, and you calibrate it locally. Well, how fast can you open? Nobody knows. It also depends on how smart you are in the opening. Now, if you open businesses and the employees are smart and the business owners are smart, well, then theoretically nobody should get infected, right? You should be able to go to work, be 6 feet apart from everyone, have the right precautions, nobody gets infected. You do it wrong, you're at the meat processing plants and the poultry processing plants that we've seen across the nation. You open up, everybody goes to one place, a few people have the infection, and now you have 1,000 workers infected. How did that happen? It was improper precautions in the workplace. So it depends on how businesses do, how employees do, and then you watch those dials. As fast as you can reopen. Just watch the dials.
Governor Cuomo, as businesses are coming up with these reopening plans and we move on from phase 1 to phase 2, how long will the businesses in each phase keep these plans in place? Like, say, how long will they have to stay 6 feet apart, or when will it be okay to maybe lift those plans?
It depends on the facts. You'll know. You'll watch. Your basic question is, when do we don't have to worry about the virus anymore? I hope it's tomorrow. I doubt it's tomorrow. It depends on how good we are at reducing the spread and controlling the spread. It's how smart we are. It's our actions, our behavior. That's why I come back to who slowed the spread in the beginning? The people of this state. Nobody else. There was no government action. It was an unprecedented action of the people, presented with the facts, informed and engaged. Hasn't happened in my lifetime. Hasn't happened in my lifetime. I've never seen this situation before, where people actually did what the Founding Fathers thought they would do. That they would really care and really get engaged and really get informed and really act on what they believe. For so many years, what government did was just irrelevant or overly political, or you didn't believe anyone, you didn't trust anyone, so they just tuned it out, right? I have to live my life. I can't watch this sideshow called government politics. Yeah, well, now it's a matter of life and death, and they got engaged. I'll tell you something else gratuitously. I also believe if we actually learn from this moment, we talk about reimagining New York so that we don't just build back, we build back better, and we're going to do that. I also think this is a moment that could change history in this country for the better. Whoever the you is that started this virus, you had a wake-up call for this country and a moment in history that people have never gone through before. You stopped the country. You stopped the economy. We call it pause in New York. You put people's lives on pause. And everyone went through a period of turmoil and stress and reflection on their own personal lives, their family lives, their whole situation. Government, society, I think this is going to be a reevaluation all across the board. And I think we can be the better for it. I believe that. I believe we individually can be the better for it. I believe my kids are going to be the better for it. I believe I am going to be the better for it. I believe my family is going to be stronger for it. And I believe the state is going to be better for it on an individual and a collective level. And I think people are going to think about society and government differently than they ever did, because it really, really matters now. And they understand how government can make a significant difference in their lives. And it's not going to be a sideshow anymore. They're not going to tolerate it. I believe that. So they were in charge, the people. They accomplished a great, great feat in this state. We had the worst situation in the nation. The worst. And now our numbers are on the decline, and the rest of the country is still on the incline. So what New Yorkers did, nobody could have imagined. If they show that same resolve and intelligence in this next phase, it's up to them. It is up to them.
Governor, with businesses reopening and schools still closed, there's going to be a need for childcare. Are there guidelines for daycares reopening? I didn't see it on your graph there. When could daycares open?
Yeah, it's a very good point. Look, we said all along, the closing of the schools had a direct impact on what you could do with the businesses, right? And we said you couldn't open all the businesses wholesale without opening schools because you'd make it very problematic. How do people go to work with their children at home? We said we're not opening schools for the remainder of the academic year. So these business openings until the end of the academic year, you're going to be in phase 1, phase 2. You're not going to have all the businesses open, but arranging child care for those workers who need it are one of the responsibilities of these regional councils. You have to have daycare available, child care available for those workers who now are going to go back to work.
One more. Can you hear me okay with this thing on?
With the mask?
Yeah.
Leave the mask on.
All right.
For multiple reasons.
You sound like the father of a woman I dated. Yes.
The father of the woman you dated was right. I would make an exception on the I like the boyfriend rule if you were the boyfriend. Just so we're clear.
Three key factors for regional reopening: hospitalizations, hospital deaths, new hospitalization rates. You explained that. The one thing is, a lot of our viewers want to see that on a consistent data. They want to be able to see how a region is doing. And we can't seem to get that data. We know that you have it, and it's provided to you. You're kind enough to share it on a statewide basis. But again, this is a regional
yes, sir.
factor.
You're exactly right.
Wow, thank you. So, if you...
lightning strikes.
Yes. So,
just when you thought it was impossible.
Yeah. So,
anything can happen once.
Yeah. So...
Blind chicken gets a kernel of corn every once in a while. Go ahead.
All right. So... none of the state health department does have a website where they provide information, but none of those are things, the metrics upon which the data of reopening are based. You have said you've worked very hard every day to make sure that we get information and to hold you accountable. Can you get the state health department to start releasing that information on a consistent daily basis so folks all involved in this can keep track of it and know how we're doing?
Good question. You're right. When can we put up the daily hospitalization rate region by region?
This dashboard that the governor put up today will be public today. So you can go to a website, you'll see how the regions are doing. It gets updated every 24 hours starting today.
One more thing on a business reopening. Do they have to submit a plan to the state?
No, they do it region by region.
The regions will handle it? Because some were concerned that if there's one agency in charge of this, they may get overwhelmed like the State Department of Labor was. So it's the regional
region by
Bob
region.
Duffy will help us with that?
Bob Duffy, Adam Bello, Joe Morelli. Call Joe Morelli. Phone number 202. Thank you very much. God bless you.
You have been listening to special coverage on Bloomberg Radio of the Andrew Cuomo update, as usual, of what's happening with COVID-19 today. Governor Cuomo's pandemic update says we are on the other side of the mountain and is talking about phased reopening, but says among the criteria to reopen, numbers must show a decline by CDC guidelines, and testing and tracing programs are in place. The governor says some regions are ready to go today. They just need to get some logistical pieces in order by the end of the week. The current order is set to expire on the 15th. Businesses need to be socially distanced, he says, and workplaces may need to be adjusted. Come May 15th, the state will reopen some low-risk businesses such as landscaping and gardening, outdoor low-risk recreational activities like tennis and drive-in movies. But the governor says if things go south, they'll pull the plug. That's been your COVID-19 update from Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York State. Now we return to Bloomberg's regularly scheduled programming which is David Weston and Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Certainly have to protect the integrity of the vote. As far as you can tell, Lonnie, is there any right, left, Republican, Democrat skew to the concern about the safety of our balloting?
Well, I think both Republicans and Democrats agree that we need to preserve the safety of the system, the integrity of the system. I think there are disagreements, though, about the best way to do that. I think Republicans have been skeptical of widespread expansion of mail-in voting, for example, for some of the reasons I indicated. The infrastructure challenges, also concerns about fraud, which a bipartisan election commission back in the mid-2000s found that mail-in balloting was slightly more susceptible to that. So we just have to figure out ways to ensure that the system is safe and secure going forward. I think that's a bipartisan goal that hopefully both parties will share going forward.
Okay, Lonnie, I really appreciate your being with us. Always do. That's Lonnie Chen. He is from the Hoover Institution. And coming up on Balance of Power, we're going to talk with Republican Representative Patrick McHenry of North Carolina about those plans that at least Speaker of the House Pelosi has to have a new spending bill. That's coming up. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Have you wanted to speak a new language?
Sick of this. We're gonna do this doggy style.
Did somebody say just eat?
Me, get delivery like a G. See, hungry dogs gotta eat. I get mines every day, every week. Chicken wings to the crib, I'm sitting in. Burger in the low. Hope they put the pickle in. Wonton on a catamaran. Oodles and noodles, thank you, my man. Tacos to the chateau. Please, did somebody say just eat? Private jetting in the night sky. My man hand glide by with my fried rice. Right? What could you not love? Bought a slice on the side of the hot tub. Ooh, what you gon' do, boo? Chocolate fondue right on cue. Even dipping in the sea. I see food, seafood sees me. J-U-S-T-E-A-T.
Somebody say just eat.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Butcher Selection quarter pounder beef burgers, get a 4-pack for just £2.28. And salmon fillets, get a 2-pack for only £2.97. So dinner's always a winner. At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Our stock of the hour is AMC. Its stock has jumped today on rumors that maybe Amazon might be interested in buying it. And here to explain why, we have Abigail Doolittle. So, Abigail, explain to me why. I understand it's cheap, AMC's cheap, but some people would think it's cheap for a reason. Why would Amazon want it?
That's a great point, or a great question, David, because it's pretty clear why AMC would want out, considering that their stock is down so much recently. As for why Amazon would be interested in AMC, that probably has more to do with their Amazon online, their streaming business, and the fact that they last year made the choice when they have a big movie release to bring it right in-house. So a lot of outside venues, similar to Netflix with the Paris Theater last year, not as open to them. So they want a venue perhaps for some of those big names. But relative to AMC, gosh, what a difficult time for them. Movie sales really sliding down on the lockdown and the shutdown. The stock on the day, David, really pretty incredible. Casino-like, in fact. You have AMC at the highs up 56%. Of course, it is a penny stock, to your point, very cheap. Now up 38%. The UK Mail saying that they are in talks. However, Deadline.com, David, saying not so fast. It may not be true. So there may be more coming on this story.
Well, that's my question, really. How much credit do we put in this rumor? And by the way, is there anybody else that might want to buy it as well?
That's an interesting question. Possibly Netflix, because again, last year, that purchase of the Paris Theater to showcase some of their movies that could, in fact, be Oscar-worthy or award show-worthy. So that might be a competitor. Relative to price on AMC, trading right now around $600 billion. That would be on the smaller side, at least for Amazon. And Amazon, over time, David, they really have not grown through acquisition. They've been more of an organic sales story. But relative to the acquisitions, probably the best well-known one, Whole Foods at $13.6 billion. A number of years ago, they made one that was about $500 billion. Quidizi, I don't know if I'm quite saying that right, that turned into diapers.com. They've actually closed that business down, but that's $500 million. So that would be along the lines of what AMC would be. One analyst, David, saying that Amazon would be interested in paying cash. AMC might not actually want that. They might want something relative to share. So lots of nuances here, something to pay attention to going forward. But again, today, lots of very interesting trading action there for AMC, absolutely soaring on the day, David.
Yeah, I'm sure AMC is hoping there's something to the story. Thank you so much to Abigail Doolittle for that report on AMC. Coming up here, we're going to talk with Representative Patrick McHenry of North Carolina. He's the ranking Republican on the House Financial Services Committee. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are mostly lower on concerns the economy is in for a slow and painful comeback from the devastation caused by the pandemic. The Dow is falling 156 points, S&P down 8, but the tech-heavy NASDAQ is up 39 points. AutoNation, the country's biggest car dealership chain, posted more profit for the first quarter than expected, and the company is bullish, saying its sales were up at the end of last month. But Marriott saw the hotel business collapse last month. Revenue per available room dropped 90%. It's a sign the company faces a tough road to recovery from the pandemic. And we may not be able to go to the movies, but shares of AMC Entertainment are up after a report said Amazon has talked about a takeover of the country's largest movie theater chain. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Debbie Hart is president of BioNJ, which represents the interests of more than 400 New Jersey-based biotech companies. She's also a strong voice in the biotech sector, supporting research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology. She sees NJIT as a valuable partner in attracting venture capital and biotech startups to the Garden State.
So the number one reason that companies come here to New Jersey for the biotech industry is for our talent. We estimate that there were about 30 biotech companies in the early 90s in New Jersey, about 80 in 1998. Today there are more than 400. And that growth continues, and it's come from every possible angle. Other countries, other states, they've spun out of our academic institutions as well as our biotech and our pharma companies, and we expect that growth to continue long into the future. And NJIT is a pipeline for talent, for companies, for entrepreneurs to do that important work.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty about the virus.
Political reversals.
It's not clear that some of the Republicans up on the Hill are agreed with the Republican White House.
Economic shifts.
The macro clearly being driven by the coronavirus outbreak.
Everything seems to be in motion.
Will it also mean a global recession in your view now?
But here, you're on solid ground.
Looking forward to guiding you through all of this.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. We go now to Bloomberg First Word News with Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her fellow Democrats are expected to complete the next coronavirus stimulus package this week. It's likely to contain more than $700 billion for state and local governments. But the White House and Senate Republicans are not in a rush after spending more than $3 trillion so far. They're putting an emphasis on other priorities. One of those is shielding businesses from liability if their employees get sick. The Chinese city where the coronavirus pandemic started has reported its first new infections since April 8th. That's when Wuhan ended its 76-day lockdown. The new cases were found in people already under quarantine. China has been slowly reopening its economy. Encouraging news from Spain. The country recorded its lowest daily coronavirus death toll in almost 2 months. Spain has moved into the latest phase of a gradual easing of its lockdown rules. The country has had more than 227,000 cases, the highest in Europe. More than 26,000 people have died. India is considering allowing some domestic flights to resume this week, or next week, excuse me. The government is looking to reopen a key part of the economy. Airlines haven't been allowed to fly since March because of a nationwide lockdown. Bloomberg has learned a decision could come today. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Mark. As Mark just said, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, is working hard with her Democratic colleagues to put together another spending package. But it's not all that clear at the moment when that's going to go forward or even whether it's going to go forward. We welcome now Representative Patrick McHenry. He's the ranking member on the House Financial Services Committee in the House of Representatives. He is a Republican. So welcome, Congressman. Good to have you with us. Let me ask you perhaps the most basic question. Do you believe that there will be some fourth round, as it's called? Is this a matter of whether or is it a matter of when?
I think it's a question of when and to what extent. What we don't understand right now is the magnitude of the economic pain. We have current statistics, but we don't know what this looks like as state by state reemergence into the normal economy, how that develops. Tennessee and Georgia, we see examples there, but it seems slow that people are getting back to normal economic life out of health safety. And so what I am counseling is that we, measure twice and cut once. If we're going to legislate again, let's make sure that we're hitting those and helping those that need the most assistance and doing the right thing for the long term of our country.
There's the question of how the overall economy is going. As you suggest, Congressman, it may well vary, will vary probably from state to state. But isn't there a pretty broad agreement that the states themselves, the state and local governments are really getting hit? We have both Republican and Democratic governors coming forward saying we're really getting hit both on increased costs and on reduced revenues. Should we be doing something about that in the meantime?
Well, yes. And I think you'll have some level of state aid be a part of the next package. It's a question of what you get in return for doing this. Do you say to the states you have to be fiscally responsible on a going forward basis, have to have a rainy day fund on a going forward basis? Many of these states were in poor financial conditions before this happened. And we don't want to just prop up profligate spending at the state level. We want to be effective to ensure that states don't have to declare bankruptcy. And so I think there is some level of consensus around that for the next package.
But we're not pressed right now. I think we have 2 to 3 months before that becomes a pressing issue.
So does that suggest that perhaps this could wait 2 or 3 months, that maybe we shouldn't expect anything until well into the summer?
Yeah, I think we're looking at June or July before you have the next round of spending package come out of Congress. I think that would be the responsible thing. I'll give you one example. The university systems. Do we know if universities and colleges are going to go back in the fall? We know if they don't have students in the dorms, you have a massive physical plant for every one of these universities. Are you going to have states impacted based off of their university systems not having students on campus? And to what extent? So let's make sure that we understand the issues that are affecting people before we try to seek to fix them. Currently, we still have additional funds to probably the tune of over $1 trillion that's yet to be actually put out into the market from the last CARES Act. So let's make sure that those dollars are effective before we spend again.
That's about the next round, the so-called fourth round. Let's talk about the rounds that have come so far. You were a very active proponent of the payroll protection program, particularly for smaller businesses. We now have an Inspector General report suggesting that maybe that money, a lot of it, didn't go where Congress really intended and went to somewhat larger companies, not the smaller ones. Are you concerned about that issue?
Sure. I'm always concerned about the taxpayer dollar being spent effectively and in compliance with the law. What we see here, what the Inspector General highlighted, is that they largely did that. And when you're putting out $300 to $400 billion in a period of 4 weeks, there are going to be mistakes made, and there were mistakes made with this program. But it was still largely effective. There are thousands of small businesses that are around today because of this assistance, and you have tens of thousands of employees that are able to collect a paycheck because of the Paycheck Protection Program. So it was still largely effective, though there were some failures.
Congressman, whether it's round 1, 2, 3, or a possible 4, how are we going to pay for this? We're talking about something like, I think, $4 trillion in deficit at this point. That money has to come from somewhere, or does it?
It does. Eventually, it comes home to roost. And on this, I think we have to be methodical about this next spending package, because over the long term, we are going to have to pay this money back. Our debt and deficits will impair economic growth for the next generation. So we want to make sure that we are appropriate in response to this crisis and not overspend, but effectively spend, and make sure that we don't needlessly put people through additional pain. That we get treatment resources online, that we get new testing online, and those things are highly important. And then as we reemerge, we need to make sure that we have deregulation agenda that lifts people into being able to use their money more effectively, and some tax relief paired with that, so you can get people back on their feet very quickly.
Well, that's my question about tax relief, actually, because we're hearing out of the White House that what they'd like in a new package would include payroll tax suspension or forgiveness, and maybe even capital gains relief. Does that make sense if we're worried about the deficit, that we're going to be cutting taxes at the same time? Don't we have to pay for this through increased taxes at some point?
Yes, and that's why I think you have to have entitlement reform paired with a payroll tax relief bill. And I think we can marry those two things up so that we pare down our entitlement spending over the next 20, 30 years, and to pay for and the trade-off there was that you would get some tax relief in the short term for those that are most affected by this shutdown of our economy. I think that's quite a good pairing. You actually have long-term cuts in order to pay for a short-term program.
Can you have something that's been talked about forever and nothing that's been done about, that is to say entitlement reform, at a time when some of the least fortunate among us are being hit the hardest by this pandemic? This is not the time necessarily to hit the social net, right? That's
exactly right. I think you've hit it. I mean, this is we have a series of very complex decisions we have to make. The initial decision to shut down was a much clearer decision than what we're faced with coming out of this. What's the proper response with tax relief? What's the proper response for spending? How does that pair with our debt and deficit predictions? How does that match up with public safety and public health? And these things are quite complex issues that we've got to struggle with and work through on a bipartisan basis, so we give the public some reassurance that it's safe and to re-engage in the economy, and that our long-term finances are adept so you can invest in this country.
Does a payroll tax cut make sense when it only goes to people who have jobs, and the people who need to be taken care of are the ones who don't have jobs?
Well, yeah. Well, it's tough to say that to the person who wants to get a job. And so what I see with the unemployment rate skyrocketing, most of these folks were employed before. They want to work. They want to provide value. It is a meaningful part of their life. And so what I would say is that payroll tax relief is about getting people back into the economy and off of unemployment insurance and back into re-engaging to grow this economy back out. And I think that would be a nice incentive for people to be able to get back into working and off the more generous unemployment benefits that were part of the last CARES package.
Okay, Congressman, really appreciate your time today. You were very generous with us. That's Congressman Patrick McHenry, Republican of North Carolina. Coming up here, we're going to talk with a patient's right advocate. She is Cynthia Fisher, about exactly what reform of the healthcare system looks like during a pandemic. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This probably wasn't.
Did somebody say just eat?
Me, get delivery like a G. See, hungry dogs gotta eat. I get mines every day, every week. Chicken wings to the crib, I'm sitting in. Burger in the low. Hope they put the pickle in. Wonton on a catamaran. Oodles and noodles, thank you, my man. J-U-S-T-E-A-T.
Somebody say just eat.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the USwitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Butcher Selection Quarter Pounder Beef Burgers, get a 4-pack for just £2.28. And salmon fillets, get a 2-pack for only £2.97. So dinner's always a winner. At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Phishing emails are designed to trick you into giving away personal details. Messages might be about travel refunds, delivery tracking, or supermarket vouchers. Remember, never click on links or attachments in emails received out of the blue.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries, just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Sports and festivals on hold. Weddings and christenings on hold. Marathons on hold. But not everything is on hold.
My name's Lynn and I have terminal cancer. I don't know how many weeks I have left.
In this time of national emergency, Marie Curie nurses and hospices are needed more than ever. We can only care for dying people like Lynn if you donate. Visit mariecurie.org.uk to donate to our emergency appeal.
Want Apple's latest Mac?
From just £34 a month.
With no deposit.
Buy online now from krcs.co.uk. Your local Apple experts. And get your Mac with all this, plus 2 years warranty.
And free next day delivery.
See our full Apple range now at krcs.co.uk. Representative example cash price 103306. 36 months at 33.97. Total payable 1222.92. Representative 11.9% APR.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 ball games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, plays to the 5, touchdown!
Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Here, the Trump administration has already implemented these rules. So as we go forward, it's really embraced by consumers. And in fact, David, in the Harvard-Harris poll, 88% of all Americans actually strongly supported the government mandates for hospitals and insurance companies to reveal their prices before we get care. Posted online.
Is there there's a basic fairness, basically, in knowing what the price is before you have to pay it. No question about it. You also hope that it will bend the cost curve for healthcare, because I think one of the things that may come out of this pandemic is a clamor for broader coverage.
Yes. Well, as we look at this pandemic and what the experience has been for families trying to protect the very savings that they have and not sure of their next paycheck, we've seen variance in pricing from $75 for COVID testing to as high as $6,000. So having been blindsided by a $6,000 bill after the fact, when they could have gone to a direct primary care physician for $75, having that kind of choice allows the American patient and worker, and even employer for that matter, to keep those types of funds in their pocket. And when we can see prices, we know that we'll be able to drive down the cost of care and coverage. And you mentioned how. Well, a Journal of American Medical Association last year said that 25% of our billing charges are administrative waste. You could imagine if we can see prices, we could just cut to the quick and we would eliminate that 25%. Then add on to that any kind of fraud or price gouging. When prices are seen, the consumer in control, yes, we'll see a reduction in the cost of care and ultimately downstream the cost of coverage as well.
So Cynthia, are you pretty optimistic that you will actually get this disclosure of prices, this transparency, as you call it, in round 4, as it's called, of the stimulus?
Well, I am optimistic because, I think the Congress leadership, McConnell, we've got Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the president himself. We're looking across our country, and people now more than ever are needing to protect not only their health, but their wealth. And as we go into this, the $1 trillion stimulus that Nancy Pelosi just is coming together with the Democrats on the House side to propose, wanting accountability and transparency, there is an answer, and that is to simply codify these rules. They've already been baked, David. In fact, 23,000 Americans reported in overwhelmingly in support, telling their own stories about how they were surprised or blindsided by medical bills they couldn't afford and never knew they had to pay. So they weighed in strong support. And I think it's time now for Congress to really listen to its constituents versus the lawyers and lobbyists that had previously lined the hall, but are at least lining their telephone and their Skype right now. But I would encourage any American consumer to reach out to their congressmen and women in this moment of time to say how important it is for them to have price transparency in the next
Cynthia,
stimulus.
thank you so much for being with us. Really important to cover. That's Cynthia Fisher. She's patientrightsadvocate.org. She's the chairman there. In the meantime, coming up in the second hour of Balance of Power, we're going to talk with the man who runs the hospital system that first had to treat COVID-19 present patients. That is Dr. Rod Hochman. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
In these times of loss and crisis, the people you trust to ask the questions you need answered become even more vital.
Should the president, though, impose the Defense Production Act?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Help us understand what we know so far.
Bloomberg Business Week.
They are on the front line of the impact of the coronavirus.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up to date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. The airline industry all around the world is being hurt badly. The IAG says it could take to 2024 before it recovers. And that certainly includes Europe, with a Spanish economy minister, she is Nadia Calvino, spoke exclusively to Bloomberg Television earlier today about exactly what the extreme measures are that they're willing to take to help save the industry.
The airlines were in a different health situation before the crisis broke. We see that some airlines were already in a tricky financial situations. Others had a more robust balance sheet, and so they may require different kinds of support. We are strongly supporting that there's a European response. All these large carriers are not of one nationality nationality or another, they are European carriers. And that's why we're strongly defending that we would provide a level playing field and the different sorts of support provide a similar level of funding and similar level of credibility and strength to the different operators so that we do not create competition problems.
Actually, European countries are in different boats. In terms of fiscal responsibility, some countries like Germany have just been historically better at dealing with finances than countries like Italy and Spain. I mean, you already had a big debt before we came into this. And B, countries like Germany don't have the kind of social safety net. For example, here, when you're out of work, you get paid 65% of your salary. And there, I think it's closer to 80%, right? So shouldn't money that essentially Germany is lending to Spain and Italy be attached with some conditions?
Well, insofar as the safety net is concerned, I'm afraid that Germany has a much stronger safety net than we do. Every year we get recommendations from the European Commission, from other international institutions saying we should reinforce our redistributive systems. Unfortunately, they are not the strongest part that we have in our country. But you're right that in the previous years we have made a huge effort to reduce our debt to GDP levels. I was actually quite satisfied that in the last year we had been able to go down very significantly, down to 95.5%. And unfortunately, this year we expect this ratio to go up to around 115%. This is a temporary exception, if you wish, of a downward trend, which I hope we will be able to resume as soon as recovery is stronger. But for the moment, all countries are going to be faced with the same trouble, which is we cannot put health and the economy on different plates. We need to get out of the health crisis as soon as possible if we want the economy to recover as strongly as possible.
Minister, and to do that, will you borrow from the ESM? Changes have been made to it to make it more favourable to borrow there during this coronavirus. So will you borrow from the ESM?
I think it's very good that we have been able to reach an agreement on 3 different funding tools, which are based on loans. These are not grants or transfers. These are loans to the countries. One is the ESM, as you pointed out, a pandemic precautionary line. Secondly, a new instrument called SURE that would reinforce short-term work schemes like the ones that we have enacted in Spain in particular. And thirdly, the EIB to provide common guarantees. We're strongly supporting these 3 instruments. We think it's good that all member states could have access to additional funding sources. But for the moment, our funding conditions are very, very favorable. In the last auctions we have done, our T-bills, 12-month T-bills have gone into the negative area again. We have been able to get very good conditions, and therefore we do not have any problem with tapping financial markets. Still, I think it's good that there's a safety net for citizens, for companies, and for governments at the European level, which provides an additional reinforcement element for us to face this pandemic.
That was Spain's economy minister. She's Nadia Calvino. She spoke earlier to Bloomberg Television. Coming up on the second hour of Balance of Power, we're going to be talking with Dr. Rod Hochman. He is the Providence St. Joseph Health president and CEO. One of his hospitals was the first one to treat a COVID-19 patient in the United States. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. High-end home prices in New York, London, Hong Kong, Vancouver, Singapore have dipped in the first quarter of this year, according to a Knight Frank report, while the market as a whole is broadly stagnant. Surprisingly, luxury home prices in Tokyo and Stockholm have risen during the pandemic. Neiman Marcus is the next in line to join J. Crew, John Varvatos, and True Religion on the fashion bankruptcy train. Although Neiman Marcus' CEO says restructuring will allow the more than 100-year-old retailer to make investments and turn itself away from a traditional department store, and customers will return. Disney's recovery starts May 20th with a handful of restaurants and shops in its Florida mall. Theme parks in Orlando, though, will remain closed, while Shanghai Disneyland is reopening, albeit with fewer than 30% of its 80,000-person-a-day capacity. The entertainment giant lost $1.4 billion last quarter. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
There are times when you have to go it alone, but these should not be those times.
With a medical crisis, can any other central bank execute?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Ferro.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro in the coming months.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Do we have the ability to coordinate with this virus?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
When things move this quick, do things break?
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet, back to work Monday, and it is a mixed session. The Dow now lower by 46 points, down by about 0.2%. S&P advancing now by 4, up by 0.1%. And NASDAQ is higher by 68 points for the NASDAQ Composite Index. That is a gain of just about 0.8%. Just getting word that New York City had 24,172 deaths, more normal than normal during the coronavirus outbreak. The 10-year down 9/30 seconds with a yield of 0.71%, and gold is down 0.4% right now, $16.96 the ounce, down $5.91. West Texas Intermediate crude dropping 1.3%, down 31 cents a barrel right now at $24.43. Well, some of the stories that we are following for you today, we've got Saudi Arabia announcing an extra voluntary oil production cut of 1 million barrels a day, bringing output to its lowest in 18 years as the kingdom tries to prop up a nascent recovery in energy markets. Marriott International saw its business crater in April with travel virtually shut down around the world. Revenue per available room, known as RevPAR, a measure of occupancy and pricing, decreased 90% in April, a sign that the company is facing a tough road to recovery from the pandemic. Marriott International shares, they're down today by 4.5% at $83.25. And now, with a closer look at what's happening in commodities, here's Bloomberg's Renita Young.
Saudi Arabia announces a surprise move to slash oil output by an extra 1 million barrels a day. This brings production to its lowest in 18 years. Gold investors are balancing moves to reopen economies after coronavirus lockdowns against concerns over a new wave of infections and U.S.-China trade tensions. And copper is trading in tandem with miners and steel makers as investors turn cautious about government moves to ease lockdowns. Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
And again, crude, West Texas Intermediate down now by 1.1%, $24.46 a barrel. It is 1:02 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. And here is Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are lower, unlike U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is down 0.4%, and the S&P 500's up 0.1%. Airlines serving the UK are down after Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the country will soon require most passengers from other countries to go into quarantine. Ryanair Holding has lost 7.7% in U.S. trading. And British Airways owner IAG has fallen 5.7%. Luxembourg's ArcelorMittal has tumbled almost 18%. The steelmaker plans to raise about $2 billion by selling shares and convertible notes. The proceeds will be used to reduce debt. Germany's ProSiebenSat.1 has risen almost 8%. U.S. private equity firm KKR disclosed that it bought a 5.2% stake in the media company. Now, KKR had been one of ProSieben's largest holders between 2006 and 2014. China's Kingsoft Cloud Holdings has gained 6.8%. The provider of cloud computing services is higher for a second day after raising $510 million in a U.S. initial public offering. Kingsoft Cloud jumped Friday by 40%, Charlie.
All right, we thank you very much, Dave Wilson. Again, recapping S&P up now by 5, up by 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
Everybody in the world has one common enemy, and that's to win the war against this virus.
The first thing you do is listen to the medical professionals.
Those people that lost their pay, we want to see that pay continued.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
Our priority is the health and well-being and the lives of the American people.
We want to make sure that we are continuing to support our hospitals.
We've unleashed our most potent weapon of all, the courage of the American people.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
The nation struggles with reopening the economy without restarting in the epidemic. People are suing China over the damage done by COVID-19, and markets start the week with a second thought after those stunning job loss numbers on Friday. From New York, welcome to the second hour of Bloomberg Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Markets have bounced back some 30% from the March trough, and even 20.5 million lost jobs in April didn't seem to slow them down on Friday. But now, as a new week begins, there appears to be at least some hesitation as efforts around the world to restart the economy are showing some of the risks. Here to take us through the markets is Bloomberg Markets live cross-asset reporter, blogger, Kriti Gupta. So, Kriti, welcome for being here. Give us a take on where the equity markets are at the moment. They seem to be mixed last time I looked. Kriti, are you there? Hello, Kriti?
That's right. You were hitting the equity markets. You were describing them as mixed. I think that's the perfect way to really describe them. The NASDAQ was really outperforming even earlier in the day. You're seeing that continue. And you're seeing the S&P actually now officially in the green, while the Dow's still in the red. So some mixed emotions here as we're seeing the virus kind of creep closer to the White House. Alongside this idea of reopening and a phased reopening. So some mixed emotions here coming out of the White House administration, and that's why you're seeing kind of this mixed picture here. A lot of today's trading happening really on technical levels.
Yeah, and the question I guess you're posing, Kriti, is how much of the market's bounce back, because it has been fairly dramatic, I'd say, given the economic numbers, has been because they think the economy is going to reopen, and how much of that's U.S. and how that's global, because we've seen some setbacks, for example, in South Korea, places like that. Even in China, there's some rumor about some things coming back, maybe a second wave on its way.
That's right. And it's that fear that's really weighing on markets here. I mean, if you just look at the oil market, for example, a great example of what you mentioned about this second wave, you saw headlines earlier that Saudi Arabia is voluntarily cutting their output by 1 million barrels. Now, if we were in a normal world, that would mean a massive jump in crude. And although we did see a spike in crude, you're actually seeing crude back down in the red because of what you just mentioned, this idea of a second wave, going through this idea of a shutdown again, through these lockdown restrictions again. You are seeing some hesitation in really buying this kind of market where we're talking about reopening, yet there may still be these massive risks to health and to consumer confidence.
Thus far, it seems like the drive up in equities, such as it's been, has come from 2 or 3 sectors. Technology, certainly. Also, healthcare has done quite well, I think. Is that what we're seeing again this week so far on the first day?
Tech, for sure. That is not going anywhere. You're really seeing that kind of safe haven bid really take us higher. You are seeing, like you said, healthcare and technology, consumer discretionary as well. And I remember a lot of these kind of high trading. We had this great story out from our cross-asset team about how a lot of this trading happening in the equity market is really the fear of missing out, and especially these healthcare stocks that are all getting in on antibody tests, vaccinations, mask production. those kind of things are really spurring some major stock rallies, and you're really seeing people pile in with really heavy volume into those stocks. And that's why you're seeing healthcare really grow here. But once again, that's feeding into this underlying thought that if the underlying economy isn't functioning the way it should be, is showing these kind of mass unemployment numbers, should the stock market really be rallying? And how much of this stock market rally is really based on the fundamentals as opposed to the fear of missing out? So when you're seeing healthcare and consumer discretionary, for example, look at the names in particular, whereas tech is going to be more of your safe haven bids. You're looking for those strong balance sheets, those cash-rich, liquid global growth firms, and that's why you really see the NASDAQ outperform on most days.
So we're well into the earnings season now. We're sort of on the last legs of it. I think we got retail next week or so. Can you wrap it up? I mean, were earnings as bad as people expected them to be?
Earnings were sort of on par. You're really waiting for second quarter earnings to see just how bad the damage is. Remember, a good chunk of the damage was done in the month of April, and you really saw that in the economic data in particular, where you saw unemployment go to this record number. So you're really expecting a lot of those hits to show up in the second quarter earnings. Whereas in the first quarter earnings, we really only had those last 2 weeks of March where the market was really hit. So keep in mind that when you're looking at kind of earnings, to keep in mind that we still have worse numbers to come out. Now, remember something to keep in mind when you're looking at these corporate announcements is how much debt is being issued, how many partnerships are being announced with private equity firms. You're really seeing kind of this race to cash here, whether it is to capital markets or finding other sources of fundraising, and you're seeing that really across sectors.
So, Kriti, I really want to ask you about the bond market, too, because we have an enormous amount of issuance coming out of the Treasury. Thus far, it seems like people are willing to absorb it. What are we expecting this week in terms of Treasury bonds?
That's right. You actually just hit some huge headlines here across the terminal. Remember, we do have those 3-year notes, a record $42 billion auction. But you are actually seeing the demand fairly on par with what it was issued previously. I'm just looking at the numbers here. What you want to keep in mind is the way that people are actually playing this market. When you have these massive bond issuances, especially from the Treasury from the Treasury, in tandem with this kind of fear of could negative rates really come into play here, you're seeing some major movement here in the Treasury market. So, for example, today you're seeing a 4 basis point move from session lows to session highs. That's a pretty substantial move in the Treasury market. So you are seeing people really play different parts of the yield curve to kind of make the profit, make those spreads. And that's something you really want to keep an eye on this quarter in particular as we see more of these issuances roll out.
Fascinating. And the commodities overall, you mentioned oil. I thought maybe it would get a leg up, as it were, because of the Saudi decision. But what about overall in commodities? Where are we?
Well, oil is going to be your front and center right now, and it's because a lot of this idea of kind of reopening, where is the global growth picture really looking? And remember, travel and tourism really making up 10% of global GDP, so that's a big part of course, the economy. But you can use oil as kind of an indicator of, well, if we do have further to rally, if you see oil prices recover, you can kind of use that as a proxy that, okay, the global economy is recovering as well, especially as you see kind of structural changes in the underlying economy. There's a great story out over the weekend about how traffic jams in different parts of the world and how use of cars and buying more cars because people are avoiding public transportation is actually driving a rally back up in oil. But remember, they're only doing that because they're going out, they're spending money, they're going to work. So you see that kind of come in tandem with lockdown restrictions. When you look at the commodities world, you do want to definitely keep your eye on oil. But of course, when you're looking at agriculture, gold, of course, those are sector-specific stories.
Okay, thank you so much to Kriti Gupta. She's from our MLive team. That's really great to have you on, as always. In the meantime, there's a big story out right now, which is about the number of excess deaths in New York that have now been reported by the CDC. And to take us through it, we welcome Drew Armstrong, who covers all things healthcare related. So, Drew, welcome. I see the headline here, 24,172 excess deaths during a period of time from March 11 to May 2nd. What is this telling us that we didn't know before?
Yeah, so during a normal year, I mean, the city of New York is very good at, for unsurprising reasons, counting the number of people who die and are born every year. And so when you try to get a handle on exactly what happened in an outbreak like this, as we've all heard, testing and diagnosis has been particularly problematic. We've heard reports of a significant number of people who have died at home and been picked up there before they could seek care. And so it's been very challenging to get an exact idea of how many New Yorkers died of COVID-19 and also what some of the other kind of pieces of collateral damage on the healthcare system may have been that have been caused not just by the outbreak but the response to it. And what we learned today in this study that was published in the CDC journal from the city's Department of Health was that there were these 24,172 more deaths than normal during this period since March 11, when the first known New York City coronavirus death was reported, and May 2nd. And it's not just that there are deaths directly from COVID-19, but the city was able also to identify about 5,293 deaths that came from unknown causes. And that could be anything from people who weren't able to get to the emergency room in time while they were having a heart attack or a stroke because emergency services were overwhelmed. And there also could be some reduction in deaths from things like fewer traffic accidents as you have fewer cars on the road and things like that. So it's a way of painting more of a total picture of the effect of the outbreak on the city.
So, as you suggest, some of these deaths were sort of correlated with, but not caused by COVID-19. That is to say, people may have died because the healthcare system was paying attention to COVID-19 patients. Does it tell us anything about the COVID-19 cases themselves? Is it much worse than what we understood?
Yeah, I think it does give you an idea of just how bad this outbreak has been in New York City specifically. I mean, if you look at a normal course during this time in New York, you have about 8,000 deaths during that period, and 20. This is saying that you're having 4 times greater than that amount. I think that is, from a just pure public health standpoint, worrying in no matter how you look at it. And I think it also, another thing that it tells you is that I think there's a school of thought out there, or at least a thread of argument that, well, these are people who would have died anyways. They were elderly. They had the flu. They would have been taken out by the flu or pneumonia or something like that. And I think this puts a bit of I think this certainly calls that argument into question, because it's saying, okay, we looked at this at the relevant time period. These are not people who would have been dying of pneumonia or the flu anyway, or who would have passed away from cancer. It marks a significant acceleration of the number of deaths in that time period that I think is kind of hard to ignore.
So it's obviously very useful. That's really striking information. Does it make any difference to a public health official at this point about what they do?
I think one of the pieces of good news that we've been seeing out of the New York City area is the increasing decline in the number of new cases. I think that after this ends, and I'm sure these conversations are starting now, there is going to be a really hard look at what were not just the direct deaths caused by this virus, but what were the collateral effects of it. And, if you have people who skipped medication or who were afraid to go to the hospital for a medical condition that really genuinely needed care or was an emergency in some way or another, were there people who could have lived or who had a condition that could have been treated and that weren't, while we were quite understandably attempting to clear as much excess capacity in the healthcare system as possible. I think that the collateral damage of this outbreak is something that's going to demand further study in the months and years to come.
A really fascinating and important report. Thank you so much to Drew Armstrong, who, as I said, really is responsible for covering all things healthcare for Bloomberg. And now it's time for a market check, and for that we go to Charlie Plowman.
All right, thank you very much, David Weston. Happy Monday. An interesting day for the U.S. stock market here. What a turn on we have seen. Yes, the Dow is lower now by 4 points, down less than 0.1%. But at the worst level of the day, it had been down 261 points. Both the S&P and NASDAQ are advancing right now. We've got the S&P up 9 points. That is a gain of 0.3%. NASDAQ up 84. That is a gain of 0.9%. And in the year-to-date column for all of 2020, NASDAQ is now showing a gain of 2.6%. Stocks are rising as New York announces some parts of the state are ready to reopen. May 15th, easing concern over the impacts of a prolonged lockdown on the economy. S&P 500 index erasing losses amid a rally in technology shares, while the NASDAQ 100 index did advance for a sixth day. NVIDIA, by the way, jumping to a record. S&P up a 9. That is a gain of 0.3%. The Dow now positive, higher by 2, little change. NASDAQ up 85, a gain of 0.9%. 10-year, the yield 0.70%, down 8/32. Gold is down 0.3%, $16.97 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1%, $24.49 a barrel. Again, recapping, equities higher, a turnaround Monday with the S&P up 8, a gain there of 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much to Charlie Pellet. From New York, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. Families throughout the country are struggling with the fallout from the coronavirus and resulting shutdown, from lost jobs to children staying at home to unexpected expenses. But there are particular burdens being put on our military families. Welcome now Kathy Roth-Duquet. She's CEO of Blue Star Families. She has surveyed those families, those military families, and can give us a sense of what they face. So thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Roth-Duquet. Give us a sense of what you found out from your surveys.
Thanks, David. Blue Star Families has been conducting a pain point poll every week. America's military is fighting COVID-19. We have over 63,000 American military personnel on the front lines of this disease in the National Guard and also the active duty forces. And their families, likewise at home, are struggling, just like other Americans are, but they've got the additional burdens of having stop movement orders, which have disrupted moves. So in some cases, families are paying 2 rents or 2 mortgages in the place they're leaving and the place they're going to. They also have child care issues and heightened unemployment problems that are compounded from the normal problems that military families face.
So I will confess, and I'm embarrassed to say this, I had not followed this issue specifically with military personnel of the stop move orders. Explain exactly what that is, why it came to pass.
It makes a lot of sense that the military stop movement. You don't want to move people during a pandemic or during social distancing. But many folks who had their orders already had their household goods en route, and now they can't move, so they're without their clothes and their furniture. Some people had actually left their current housing, but they can't now move to their next housing. Some folks actually had earnest money down on new housing. Now it's not clear if or when they're going to move. They can't afford to stop their old payment, so they might have lost that earnest money. So that's a real burden on a lot of families.
Yeah, and listen, I don't want to characterize an entire group of people, but these are not all wealthy people. These are not all people of means. Can the military sort of make them whole on these double expenses?
This is what we're working on right now. We've been tracking this over time. It's a high of 25%. Right now, 12% of our personnel answering these surveys expect to be paying 2 leases or 2 mortgages within the next 2 months. And we need to find a way to either allow them to stay rent-free on installation housing or to provide more temporary accommodation money so that people can stay. We need to find solutions for these families. You're right. Many of them are young and they don't have savings.
Exactly. Now, you've worked in the Pentagon. You've been an official there. Mm-hmm. Is there any real resistance from the Pentagon? It seems like it's almost, forgive the expression, a no-brainer.
It should be a no-brainer. Now, we run into some problems have to be solved by legislation. And one of the issues we've been working with the Pentagon, and they've been very cooperative. We'd like to in some cases, a family has gone on ahead and now the service member can't join them. We'd like that service member to be able to stay on installation. In some cases, we might need Congress to make that approve for that situation, because right now that's not permissible by law. So that's where it gets harder.
So there's this specific issue with respect to the moving, but what are the other issues that come out in your pain poll? What do you find out?
Well, we see that 33% of both civilian and military essential personnel don't currently have child care. Lots of people don't have child care, but if you're essential personnel in the military, you have to show up for work, or you can go to the brig. So that child care pain point is one that we really need to draw attention to and work to solve. We're also really asking Congress to help us with food insecurity. 8% of our respondents are facing, don't know how they're going to pay for food next week.
Oh my.
This is a problem in the country, but we don't want our young service families. And there's a legislative solution to that, to not have their housing payments count as income because they can't spend their housing payments on food. And if that change could be made, then families could be eligible for SNAP, and that would address a lot of this food insecurity.
So those all sound like very reasonable alternatives. At the same time, Congress is pretty busy these days. They've got an awful lot of things, a lot of people clamoring for their attention. Are you getting the attention from the Hill that you feel that you need?
We could certainly use more help, and if any of your listeners wanted to roll in with their Congress people on these issues, we'd welcome that. There's a lot of fixes that really don't even involve money that would alleviate a lot of pain for our families. We have, like other Americans, we have children with autism among our ranks, and right now you can't have telehealth coverage for certain autism treatments. Just allowing that telehealth coverage would help those families with autistic kids a lot. And that's something other Americans are receiving right now.
One of the things I think a lot of us at least wonder about is military readiness in this situation. Are we giving up something on military readiness by not moving troops around, by not having them rebased? Presumably there was a reason to send them in the first place.
Yeah, I think it definitely is something that our military is grappling with right now. We had a staff order that kept people who are deployed overseas, so we extended a lot of people reintegrating from overseas deployments for 2 months. That means the new deployments aren't going out. I think our military is going to have to address that. In fact, my organization and Association for Defense Communities is hosting a town hall with some military leaders to try to discuss just these issues around deployments and training. We're invested in the military staying ready, so we need to find a way to do that safely during COVID.
Yeah, and finally, Kathy, you said that you do this survey every week. Do you see any trends? Are some things getting better, some things getting worse for these military families?
We do see some good trends. We see some resilience kicking in. And we see with the stop movement orders, we find people resolving a lot of their problems over time, and then new stop movement orders come out, but we do see people finding their own solutions. We see some improvements with people's financial situations, that people are solving problems. One thing we do see that's a little worrying is that there's a mental health burden, and we're really encouraging our mental health providers to make telehealth as available as possible, because the challenge of being in this pandemic, I think, is one that we have to carry with not just the body, but also the mind.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a really important subject. We really appreciate you being here to take us through it. That's Kathy Roth-Duquet of Blue Star Families. Coming up, President Trump says China's to blame for the pandemic, and some people at least think it should be made to pay. We talked to Professor Harold Koh of Yale Law School about attempts to sue the sovereign state of China. That is coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. When our only interactions with other people happen on a Zoom meeting or while wearing a mask, we don't need much in the way of cosmetics. That reality hit beauty company Coty, which reported a decline for earnings and revenue last quarter. It's selling a majority stake in its beauty and hair care brands Clairol and Wella to equity firm KKR. Under Armour isn't seeing as much value to the big names with their names on some of its shoes. So the company is trying to save money by renegotiating future payments on its sports marketing contracts. And sales of cars and trucks are rebounding, so says AutoNation, the country's biggest chain of auto dealerships. It says its sales were rising again late last month. On Wall Street, the Dow is down 59 points, NASDAQ up 65, S&P up 3. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at BeyondIDo.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
If knowledge is power,
The Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
Are you interested in it? This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the USwitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
For more than 20 years, Asda supported our communities. We've raised over £23 million for Fair Share and the Trussell Trust. And recently, we've donated supplies to frontline NHS workers and carers. We've always been proud to serve those around us. Visit asda.com/creating change for better. Asda, we're all in this together.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, suing China for starting the pandemic. International law scholar Harold Koh of Yale Law School is here to take us through what's possible under U.S. law. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much, David Weston. It is an up Monday now for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. The Dow wiping out a 261-point loss. It is now higher by 12, up now by 0.1%. S&P up 11. That is a gain of 0.4%. NASDAQ up 98 points now, higher by just about 1.1%. Stocks are advancing as New York announces some parts of the state are ready to reopen May 15th, easing concern about the impacts of a prolonged lockdown on the economy. S&P 500 index erasing losses amid a rally in technology shares. The NASDAQ 100 index up now for a 6-day. NVIDIA shares jumping to a record. NVIDIA up now by 3.5%. The Trump administration today approved the largest solar installation in U.S. history, giving its blessing to a Berkshire Hathaway subsidiary's 690-megawatt project just north of Las Vegas. Economists are forecasting another week of dismal U.S. economic data as the coronavirus disrupts daily life. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Bloomberg Economics says this week's numbers will portray April as the cruelest month. Retail sales and industrial production plunged on across-the-board losses, while inflation backed away from the Fed's target, signaling a bout of deflation. Economists are also forecasting another 2.5 million jobless claims, bringing the total since March to roughly 35 million. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
The 10-year yield now is 0.71%, down 10/30 seconds. Gold is down 0.3%, $16.96 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.3%, $24.16 a barrel. Saudi Arabia announcing an extra voluntary oil production cut of 1 million barrels a day, bringing output to its lowest in 18 years. But again, West Texas Intermediate crude, it is trading lower now, down today by just about 2.3%. Brent down 3.8%, $29.80 a barrel. Recapping equities higher. S&P up 11 now, up 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that, David Weston, is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. President Trump has said that China should be held responsible for what he calls very substantial damages resulting from the coronavirus pandemic. And now some lawmakers, states, and private litigants think that the U.S. courts are the ones to hold them responsible, with a series of lawsuits either begun or planned, and legislation introduced into Congress to cut off China's sovereign immunity from such suits. Welcome now an authority on international law, Professor Harold Koh, Sterling Professor of International Law at Yale. Professor Koh served as legal advisor to the State Department under President Obama and is the author of, among other things, the book Transnational Litigation in the United States Courts. So, Professor, thank you so much for coming. For those of us who don't know you, you are the authority on this subject. So give us a little primer here on foreign sovereign immunity. What is it? Where did it come from? Why would it apply here?
Well, that's nice of you to say, David, since you wrote a book on this before I did. But basically, in the United States, to sue a foreign government or an agency or instrumentality, that government has to have waived its immunity, or the immunity has to have been waived for it by congressional statute. And those waiver provisions are pretty narrow. So at the moment, there are, I believe, 6 lawsuits filed against China or its entities in Missouri, Mississippi, Nevada, Florida, California, and Texas. They're being filed against the People's Republic of China, but also a bunch of sub-entities like the Chinese Communist Party, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and also individual officials. But I think that their chances of success are collectively about 0.
So let's go through a couple of the exceptions that the litigants, as I understand it, have invoked. One is a commercial activity exception. What's the claim here that anything that the Chinese government did or did not do with respect to the pandemic was commercial?
Well, there's a reasonable thought that if a foreign government or one of its entities, like a state-owned enterprise, engages in market activity that a private entity could do, it should be allowed to be sued for that. For example, if it breaches a contract. Unfortunately, it's not clear what the Chinese entities did that looks like a commercial activity. Most of it looks like governmental failure to notify international organizations, failure to do its own public health responsibilities. In all of the complaints that filed, the only thing that looks vaguely like a commercial activity is the claim that the Chinese defendants hoarded PPE, personal protective equipment. But that's obviously a complicated factual issue to be determined. It's not clear whether they hoarded it or whether they just used up what they had. The other possible way to sue them is to say that they committed what's called in law a territorial tort. The problem is that it would have to be a tort in the territory of the United States. Both the conduct would have had to have occurred in the United States, or the effect would have to be felt in the United States, and the effect would have to be felt in the United States, both the conduct and the injury. Here, all the conduct that's being challenged occurred in China, which is far, far away.
Is there a claim here of potential fraud? That is to say that they knowingly misled the United States, and in some ways that might have happened on U.S. territory in the sense that media here picked up on it, or they talked to media here.
Well, they may have told untruths, but those some in our government have told a lot of untruths too. It's a long way from that to a claim of fraud, like in a business deal. Obviously, if I make a business deal with a private party and I trick them into buying garbage, that person could sue me for the tort of fraud and probably for breach of contract. But in diplomacy, various kinds of deceptions or misstatements occur all the time, and they're not necessarily actionable as lawsuits.
Well, it appears that there are some lawmakers up on Capitol Hill that share your concern that perhaps existing law would not support these sorts of lawsuits, and so they're proposing amendments, I guess, to the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. What are they trying to do there, and can they be so specific as to just apply against China with respect to the pandemic?
Well, you correctly point out, David, that these legislative efforts undermine the bases of the suits that have been brought because it suggests that they're immune unless there's new law. And this new law obviously hasn't passed yet. So, for example, the senator from Missouri is backing new legislation at the same time that the Missouri Attorney General is claiming that China's not immune. So they clearly are acting at cross purposes. But I think we have to be very careful on this because every time we lift sovereign immunity for a foreign government, we expose ourselves, the United States, to suits elsewhere. And this is a very bad time to be doing this. After all, the United States has the most deaths and the most cases in the world. If it reopens prematurely, Americans go overseas and infect people in foreign countries. The U.S. and its entities could be subject to billions of dollars of suits on the exact same theory in foreign courts. And it's a little strange that the same states who are suing, many of them are also trying to reopen early. So they can be charged with contributory negligence. After all, you have to calculate the damages and prove that the defendant is responsible. But if the injury occurred because, for example, Missouri didn't issue a stay-at-home order till very, very late in the game, so the defendants could conceivably counterclaim and say that they're actually responsible for some of the injury as well.
Which takes us back, just briefly here in conclusion, to why there is a doctrine of sovereign immunity in the first place. It's not just to be nice to foreign countries.
Yeah, the theory is that international national governments should address each other in the realm of foreign diplomacy. And frankly, that's what ought to be happening here. This is a lot of political theater going on in the form of lawsuits and legislation when nobody's benefiting by our raising the blame game. Really, the United States and China should be cooperating with the WHO to try to collectively address these problems and find a vaccine cure.
Makes very good sense. Thank you so much, Professor Harold Koh of Yale Law School. Coming up, we talk with the head of the first hospital system to deal with COVID-19, Dr. Rod Hochman, and where that's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
The best of Bloomberg Business.
Imagine winning 10 grand.
Yes!
With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Helen is dreaming of fighting a flock of 40-foot flamingos. But in reality, she's helping fight COVID-19 in her sleep. Like thousands of others, she's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments.
I'll fight you.
Keep fighting, Helen. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the Dream Team tonight.
Dreamlab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying to
standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Coronavirus is a global pandemic and a local story, but vast swaths of this country have no local news to speak of. It's the business model, stupid.
If a Starbucks had given away coffees for free and then started wanting to charge $5, people would have gone nuts.
The death and perhaps new life of local news on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL Show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more. Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone,
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be two champions on the field tomorrow night, and there's going to be one team hold up the trophy.
Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
The game will be 185 to 183, and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got it's thud. I can practice what they call.
Follow national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe. Keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one, not only.
Catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow fluctuating, S&P, NASDAQ, both higher. Stocks are gaining as New York announces some parts of the state are ready to reopen May 15th, easing concern over the impacts of a prolonged lockdown on the economy. S&P up 9, now higher by 0.3%. NASDAQ up 93. That is a gain of 1%. The Dow, as I mentioned, down 8. But to put that loss in perspective, the Dow Jones Industrial Average have been down as many as 261 points. Again, fluctuating with a loss right now of 2 points. 10-year down 11.30 seconds. The yield there 0.71%. Gold down 0.4%. 16.96 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.3%. 24.18 a barrel. Again, S&P erasing losses amid a rally in technology shares. Recapping, S&P down 10, down 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues. The Back to Work Monday edition. Here's your host, David Weston.
Yeah, I should get back to work. That's right. Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. From New York, this is Balance of Power. Providence St. Joseph Health is a West Coast health system that runs 51 hospitals in and around the Seattle area. It was the first to treat a coronavirus patient in the United States. And we welcome now its CEO and president, Dr. Rod Hochman. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. That's a dubious distinction of being the first, but what did you learn from it?
Oh, sure. I mean, it is. But the great thing about it was that we got started early. So that was January 21st. And what was interesting, he was also the first person in the United States to get remdesivir. We treated him there and turned around his whole case. So, in a lot of different ways, he was really a sentinel case. But it kind of got us going, recognizing we're going to have more cases. How did we get organized? We started doing telehealth. We started doing, ER avoidance with doing other things. So it really helped us get a jump on it. And, we've been at it now over 3 months.
So you hear stories about other hospital situations in which, because they didn't know what it was or how contagious it was, a number of the healthcare workers got infected with it before they really could get their arms around it. Did you have that problem, or were you that early that you knew you had to isolate right at the beginning?
It was amazing. The patient, this first patient, was smart enough to know that he had traveled to China, and he said, I may have this. So when he came in, we were fully gowned, gloved, put him into isolation. It was almost like textbook. But it really was a run-through. The irony of it was just a month before, we had done a run-through on communicable diseases to how to gown, glove, how to get ready, how to isolate, how to have negative pressure rooms. So you really have to have that down and really be ready to do it. We set up tents outside the emergency rooms early, all the types of things that you have to do in a pandemic, epidemic situation. So I think this also just kind of got our, antenna up early, and we were able to do it. So we've had less, we've obviously had some caregivers that have gotten sick, but we've been, we've had a pretty good track record across our system.
So you've got 3 lessons you learned from that you'd like to pass on to other people. Take them through some. First of all, the PPE, the personal protective equipment, medical supplies, pharmaceuticals. We haven't had enough, certainly in some parts of the country. What can we do about that?
Yeah, so, the irony of this was, I hate to say it, but, when you're on the West Coast, some of the East Coasters don't necessarily listen to us. But in February, we're talking about PPE, testing, all these things you've heard ad nauseum again and again. we knew that right away because we kind of saw that happening. So for me, on the PPE, the United States has to make all of its PPE inside its borders.
Oh, is that right? You think it should just be 100% U.S. made?
Oh, absolutely. To think that we brought the whole healthcare system down for $3 gowns and $2 masks, that's really unconscionable, right? So going forward in the future, there's no way we should have those capabilities inside the United States. The second is the testing. This has gotten crazy. I think we're finally going to get in front of it, but the sophistication now around antigen testing, antibody testing, all of those types of things, we really need. I think we're going to finally get there, but boy, we needed that sooner than later. So that would be number two. And number three is around personnel and how do you protect your caregivers? And by caregivers, it's not just, I'm a physician. It's not just about physicians and nurses. It's also about the people that are the orderlies, the folks that are cleaning the rooms and getting the food services. How do you keep your people protected? And how do you take care of them both emotionally as well? And that's one thing we've spent a lot of time. I was on a conference call this morning, and we've looked at the emotional toll this is taking on our caregivers, and we're working really hard on that problem. So those would be the big three.
Go back to the testing for a moment, because everyone says that's critical, but we don't seem to have really quite figured it out yet. How much of it is because the testing is difficult? There are reagents involved, there are swabs involved, it's an unpleasant process. Is there a hope that can be short-circuited? I talked to one person who talked about saliva test, for example.
Exactly. So I'm an immunologist, rheumatologist by training, so it came in handy here.
Yeah.
A lot of different pieces in PCR testing, all of those stages. So really the holy grail here is if you can get the antigen from the virus and be able to test for that in either blood, saliva, something that's really easy to get to. And then the test is really a one-step test. So you test for the presence of the antigen, is this someone who has COVID-19 or not? That will make all the difference in the world. And, swabbing, sending it off, reagents, all of that goes out of the way. And then the second part of it, on the antibody stuff, a lot of that will get clarity. We're going to get the right antibody tests that have the right sensitivity and specificity to say, boy, I had an illness. How do I know, do I have any antibodies? We don't know if you're completely protected, but boy, would we like to know how many folks in a population have at least some what we call IgG antibodies to this virus. It'll help us a lot in terms of predicting what the potential spread is. So those things are going to get better, faster. And then we got to hope for the 100 or so vaccine trials that they're working 24/7 to give us a couple of opportunities to see which vaccines can work.
But before we get to the vaccines, because we're not sure when that's going to happen, as I understand it, it's encouraging news that we will get there with the testing, but will we get there in time? And by in time, I mean in time to avoid another significant second wave, because right now people are starting to open up. I understand we have to be really testing a lot and isolating if we're going to protect ourselves from a new wave.
So what I think it is, I use the word, I don't know if it's another wave, we're going to have several ripples that are going on. So, people think, oh gosh, we're going to have another big wave, because it's going to happen in different sequences across the country, depending on density, geography, and workplace situations. So when I'm advising companies on what to do, the first thing I ask is, what does your work situation look like? What's the density of where people are? Because there's a direct correlation between the density of the work setting and the potential for spreading the virus. So obviously, meat plants are one. Guess what the other one is? Nursing homes, where you have a high concentration of folks in a closed space that are somewhat susceptible. So it's really kind of looking at the different situations that different employers have, using some of the same things we have. But I think we're going to see a number of ripples. We'll have some outbreaks. And hopefully we're in a situation where we can deal with those as they come, and it's not another wave that we're dealing with. And I think that's the optimistic hope of most of us on the healthcare side, that we can deal with them as they come, as long as they don't get out of hand.
But that suggests perhaps we're going to see a reconfiguration of a lot of workplaces, because the trend was to have big open workspaces with people packed in pretty close to one another.
Yeah, if any company that makes plexiglass, I would buy, because we're going to see a lot of plexiglass barriers. We're going to be some spread of the workplace. Those offices that we all took down in our workplace settings, we're going to utilize a lot of those, and we'll probably spread out who comes in when, so that we don't have the same density of people all the time.
Yeah, a number of people on a given elevator and all those things we're going to have to rethink from scratch. Thank you so much. It's a really great treat to have you with us. That's Dr. Rod Hochman of Providence St. Joseph Health. And that is going to do it for today's Monday edition of Balance of Power. I'm David Weston, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
That saying, success.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Co-op
has joined the call.
Hello?
Hi.
Can you hear me? We're getting behind the food charity Fair Share.
And sorry, you go.
And we're making it easy
For us all to do our bit.
to be a local hero. Together we've raised enough for over 2 million meals. But we still need more. So please continue to donate in store. Or by texting meals to 70490 to give a tenner.
Because even though we're apart,
We can still help each other out.
Co-op, it's what we do. Fair Share is a registered charity in England and Wales. 1110051 18 plus. Text cost £10 plus standard rate message.
Want Apple's latest Mac?
From just £34 a month.
With no deposit.
Buy online now from krcs.co.uk. Your local Apple experts. And get your Mac with all this, plus 2 years warranty.
And free next day delivery.
See our full Apple range now at krcs.co.uk. Representative example, cash price 103306. 36 months at 33.97. Total payable 1222.92. Representative 11.9% APR.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right. It is, what did we decide? It is week 8?
Nine.
There you have it.
Times, Carol Masser.
You've been at your home in New York. I've been at my home in New Jersey. 9 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
WOA.
WOA is right. So here we are, New York, New Jersey, also on YouTube. Yes, indeed, another week we are kicking off. So let's talk about today's show.
Yeah, I mean,
it's going to be an interesting one.
It's going to be, because I feel like we came into today, I said this to you earlier, it's a bit of a reality check day in some ways. I feel like we went through the weekend seeing lots of different things going on about reopening. How's that going? How's it going to go? The market's trying to digest all this. We started lower. Now we're a touch higher, a little more than a touch higher. If you look at the tech stocks, we'll hear about that in a second. But constantly reminded that this is going to be a slow road back.
Yep, we call it the reality check.
There you go. All right, let's get to Charlie Pellett. He's going to update us on all those numbers.
And what a day it has been. We did see the Dow down 261 points at the worst level of the day. Quite a recovery. It has been fluctuating between gains and losses. Right now, we've got the Dow down 21 points, a drop there of 0.1%. S&P pushing higher this Monday, up by 8 now, higher by 0.3%. NASDAQ up 94. That is a gain of 1%. So stocks are rising as New York announces some parts of the state are ready to reopen May 15th, easing concern over the impacts of a prolonged lockdown on the economy. S&P erasing losses amid a rally in technology shares. The 10-year down 10.30 seconds, yield 0.71%. Gold down 0.4%, 16.96 the ounce, and crude down 1.9%, 24.28 a barrel. Again, recapping here, equities mixed, but the S&P higher by 8 this Monday, up 0.3%. of 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. So a lot to get through over the next couple of hours. And as Jason said, reality check, we see it in the markets, but we see it as we have more talk of reopening, but also some concerns about what that looks like and how we really need to go, to be quite honest. We have to go very carefully and we have to go pretty slowly to make sure we don't have any setbacks. We will get our daily check on the virus today. Dr. Bruce Farber, he's Chief of Infectious Diseases at Northwell Health. So looking forward to talking with him about what we need to know, where we are in this process.
Well, and a lot of this is going to come down to getting people back to work. What is that going to look like? Who's hiring? Who's not hiring? What jobs are going to come back? And Carol, what jobs may be gone forever? We've seen a lot of sort of going a level down on that discussion. We're going to talk with the CEO of a big staffing company. We're talking about Randstad here on hiring during this pandemic.
Right. This is something I talked about with the CEO of Unilever about this whole idea of reskilling, because maybe not the same jobs will be there when we come back on the other side of the virus. All right. Also, how you might be able to see a concert in the not too distant future. We're going to check in with Temple Live on the upcoming FanPods concert in Arkansas. They say they're going ahead, that despite what the governor of Arkansas is saying.
Yeah, Arkansas, the state, and the Governor Hutchinson being like, maybe not so fast. So we'll get a check on that. And also talk with Mark Ein, big player in Washington, also has an understanding of how the workplace of the future may look. So we're interested to hear that as well. Let's, in the meantime, though, set the Business Week agenda.
Let's do that with Vince Signorella. He's global macro strategist at Bloomberg News on the phone from White Plains, New York. Vince, you know him. He contributes to the Macro Squawk Decks on the Bloomberg terminal, which you can find by typing Squawk Go on your launch pad. And Dave Wilson also with us, stocks editor at Bloomberg News on the remote access line from New Jersey. Vince, I want to start with you, if I may, because I am curious about some of the conversations you've been having today with traders about what's interesting, because it does feel like despite take tech out of the equation, we're not doing too much here in terms of movement on the equity side.
No, not at all. Pretty lazy day, I would say. It's almost like we're still feeling the effects of the weekend, the way the market is trading. There's not a lot of enthusiasm, I think, either side. The traders are looking for good news, though. I mean, what Governor Cuomo gave to us today was not a lot, and yet the market rallied on it. The Finger Lakes region of New York State is opening. It's hardly going to drive the economy of the United States. Right. But yeah, traders are just itching for good news to get back into this. And I think, what most traders are saying is you really need to do this slow, because everyone I talk to expects some sort of reversal of fortunes and a second wave of this virus. We're seeing some reports out of Germany, out of Korea. Singapore has had some, China as well. The fear is that we're going to reopen too soon. And I'll tell you, we spoke about this a couple of months ago when I said I thought the bottom of the market would be when New York City announces the virus is here. I think a temporary top is going to be when New York City opens, because it probably won't be long after that where we'll start to see some cases pick up again.
Right. Interesting. All right, Dave Wilson, what do you see as you look across the trade here, given that backstory?
Well, not a whole lot of direction for sure. And you could argue it's in part because you've kind of got a lull in first quarter results. I mean, there are some numbers getting people's attention. Biggest gain, the S&P 500 belongs to the drug distributor Cardinal Health, which was out with results that went over pretty well. And on the other hand, worst performer in the S&P 500, Under Armour, the athletic wear maker, their quarterly figures didn't do so well for investors. So that explains sort of the extremes. But beyond that, I mean, really, it's kind of a waiting game, because, we really don't get the retailers until next week. And, they're the kinds of companies that cap off the earnings season because, their typical fiscal quarter is a month behind the calendar. So we're talking about the 3 months ended in April. And, of course, there's going to be some ugliness in those figures, no doubt about that. I mean, given what's happened to retailing in light of the coronavirus. So, I'm looking at the numbers that we've compiled at Bloomberg for the retailing industry in the S&P 500. 67% decline in profit. And in fact, it's expected to be the low point for results based on what analysts are telling us on a company-specific basis. So, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But for the moment, it's just a bit of back and forth here.
Hey, Vince, I do wonder if the big Wall Street firms, if they weren't able to so successfully trade and operate at home, and so many businesses weren't able to, certainly the big corporations, if they couldn't work from home, whether or not, there wouldn't be more kind of push and pressure to get back?
Well, the pressure is coming. I mean, a lot of the banks have sort of starting to announce, just from a trader standpoint, they want to get the traders back on the floor because there's a big issue with compliance and tracking what they're doing. The value at risk limits are in jeopardy when a situation like this. So you're trading from home, everybody's doing their thing. It's hard to monitor the whole package at one time. So a couple of banks announced, HSBC, I believe it was one, that they'd blown their VAR limits, but they weren't punishing anyone because it was just a complete accident. I mean, it was difficult for them to track. Yeah. So Barclays London announced today some people are coming back the middle of June, and I suspect the first people that are coming back are going to be the traders.
Interesting. All right, Dave Wilson, give us a quick tease for your chart of the day.
Dividends. It's all about dividends, what they've been like and where they're going, or shall we say not going.
It's interesting. I feel like we have talked about dividends and buybacks in the last 30 days more than we have in the past year combined. It'd be like sort of a nice thing we would say, be like, oh, they got a nice dividend. You'd call it up on the Bloomberg chart and be like, oh, 7%. But now it is such the focus. Really, really interesting. All right. Thank you both so much. Dave Wilson, stocks editor for Bloomberg. You'll be back with us with that chart and later on stock of the day. And Vince Signorella, global macro strategist for Bloomberg, on the phone from White Plains.
All right, let's do the Bloomberg Business Week Bite of the Day. One number that tells us a lot, Jason. Today's number is 77%. Analyst John Vin of KeyBank Capital Markets, he says Apple's iPhone sales fell 77% on a year-over-year basis in the month of April. Sales of the device were down 56% from the previous month, according to the analyst's data.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting...
Hey, guess what? We're in a pandemic and a health crisis and everything shut down.
Well, that goes to something really important that Dave said that we're going to talk about later in the show when we talk about Macy's, which is those retail names, they're going to have April figured in. We didn't hear about April from a lot of the folks we heard from when it comes to the first quarter. That's a really, really important distinction. I'm glad Dave pointed that out. All right, let's get to Bob Moon now. He's got world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, thank you. Fears of coronavirus infection spikes have been borne out over the past few days in several different fresh hotspots around the world. In Germany, new COVID-19 clusters have been linked to 3 slaughterhouses. There's also been a renewed surge in Wuhan, the Chinese city where the virus started, and in South Korea, a single nightclub customer has been linked to 85 new cases. A top world health official warned today that countries are essentially driving blind in reopening their economies without setting up strong testing and contact tracing to beat back flare-ups of the coronavirus. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said today he's trying to be smart with plans to reopen parts of the state in carefully assessed stages starting this Friday.
This can be a science. It can be measured, right? And that's what we want to do. We want to demystify this entire issue.
House Democratic leaders are looking to introduce the next major spending bill to promote economic recovery. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports.
Best to evaluate how the economy responds in those states that allow businesses to reopen, Republican Congressman Patrick McHenry said in a Bloomberg interview, in which he agreed that states and localities will need more federal help.
You'll have some level of state aid be a part of the next package. We want to be effective to ensure that states don't have to declare bankruptcy, but we're not pressed right now. I think we have 2 to 3 months before that becomes a pressing issue.
McHenry added that state needs will also depend on whether students are able to return to state universities. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
There are times when you have to go it alone. But these should not be those times.
With a medical crisis in any other central bank, execute.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro in the coming months.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Do we have the ability to coordinate with this virus?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
When things move this quick, do things break?
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org. Because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
The world's financial decision maker.
Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling. Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling, wherever good music lives.
Switch on Acorn TV, the brand new streaming service featuring world-class TV from Britain and beyond. Watch exclusive premieres like the colourful crime drama Queens of Mystery.
Once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
And fan favourites like Inspector George Gently.
I'm just an old copper doing his job.
If you love drama with a little mystery thrown in, enjoy 30 days free with code ACORN30. Then just $4.99 a month. No adverts, no contract, cancel anytime. Join online today at acorn.tv.
The garden tools that mean you can grow your own. The fire pit that turns tea time into an alfresco dining experience. The paddling pool that turns your back garden into a water park. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16+. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
A half-price dream holiday. Wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free. Wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the Uswitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Get your cook on with Asda with Butcher Selection quarter pounder beef burgers. Get a 4-pack for just £2.28. And salmon fillets. Get a 2-pack for only £2.97. So dinner's always a winner. At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores online, subject to availability.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. U.S. stocks now trading a little changed, with the S&P 500 index up 2 points, a gain of less than 0.1%. The Dow is now down 67 points. Last update was trading a little change, down now by 0.3%, have been down as many as 261. NASDAQ is up 82 points. That is a gain of 0.9%. The NASDAQ 100 index up now by 1%. Stocks are rising as New York announces some parts of the state are ready to reopen this week, easing concern over the impacts of the prolonged lockdown on the economy. The 10-year down 11.30 seconds, yield 0.71%. Gold down 0.4%, 16.95 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude now down 3.8%, 23.80 a barrel. Recapping, S&P up 2 points, up 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. It is Monday. Carol Master along with Jason Kelly. And we recently talked with the head of Northwell Health. It's a massive hospital and healthcare system in New York State. They have seen the strains and stresses and really the devastating impact on patients brought on by COVID-19. Back with us, and with us, I should say, is Bruce Farber, Chief of Infectious Diseases at Northwell Health, on the phone from Manhasset, New York. Dr. Farber, it is really great to have you here with us. We've learned a lot by talking to the head of your hospital system. Tell us a little bit about kind of where we are, because it's an interesting week where we're seeing more reopening, but yet we're hearing of, cases now again in South Korea and places that have kind of been held up as the gold standard in terms of dealing with the virus. So what's important about what we need to know on this Monday, May 11th?
Yeah, I agree. It's a very funny time. In New York, the number of new cases is down significantly. Deaths are down significantly. At our hospital system, we're almost under 1,000 hospitalized people with COVID from a peak of 4,000. So that's a huge decrease from what it was, and that's all very good news. I think many people still think that this is going to be a game of whack-a-mole. And that we're clearly not out of the woods. We are making contingency plans for what the fall might look like when flu comes back. At the same time, I still think that there's not enough herd immunity in the community or in the world to think that this is going to be over any time in the foreseeable future without a vaccine, and that's not around the corner.
And so, Dr. Farber, talk to us, if you will, for a minute more about the New York City area. I mean, this is where you live and work. I mentioned last week when we were talking about Northwell, I'm very fortunate to live